Hello and welcome to episode 193 of the Imperial Truth podcast. My name's Greg. Joining me as ever is Mr. Howard. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How you doing? Welcome back.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad, thanks. You?
Yeah, not too bad. Surviving in the new normal that is parenthood to number two, who has joined us since we last spoke. But I'm actually getting some sleep, so counting myself very lucky for that alone. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad. Starting to get a little hankering to head back to Adepticon next year, and making sure I read the room to know that that's not going to happen. So, yeah.
So that was your not last hurrah. That doesn't sound quite right, but that was your time.
Could be, yeah, it could be for a while. I maybe need to somehow do some way of turning it into like earning a little bit of money while doing it or something, just to justify that aspect of it, and then it's trying to justify I think, well, we'll talk about it later, but could certainly do it in fewer days than I did. But
Right.
yeah, it's all good. Before we go anywhere, let's talk Element Games. They've got a new store in London. It's out,
Yes, they have.
officially open now. Have you been down? Did you manage to get down there?
I have.
Oh, you have.
It pained me that I couldn't get there for the grand opening, which was on just recently. It was on Saturday the 5th, which by all accounts was very good. They'd been open for a little bit before that just to get things working, but the grand opening has happened. I got down there yesterday actually, and it's brilliant. I would recommend it to anyone. It is a store that London has been crying out for, and the fact that it is in Central is fantastic.
How big is
There
it?
are other. It is about the size, for those who might have been there before. It's approximately the floor area, I would say, of the Tottenham Court Road Warhammer
Oh, okay.
store.
So
it's reasonable. It's not pokey. It's a lot bigger than their Nottingham store. Carries an incredible range of stuff. No, exactly. Yeah. It's not a corridor. There's, as you'd expect with the Element stores, an incredible range of hobby stuff, like the paint ranges and things, second to none. Of course, I managed to go in there and ask for a couple of things they didn't have, but then what would it be if you didn't set them a challenge? The model range is incredible. It's nice to have it because it doesn't. I don't think it particularly treads on the toes of the other stores that are there. You've got Darksphere over in the west, which there's nothing in Central really. You've got to go out to the west to get the Darksphere, which is more for bigger events because it's pretty huge there. And they've got a good range of hobby products, but not what Element have got. Or you've got Bad Moon, which is a very different sort of thing. It's a cafe and board game cafe kind of first with gaming tables. It's not trying to be a retail store. This is a retail store first and foremost. They've got a couple of tables in there. They're not up and running yet, but yeah, exactly. You can. They will be bookable for games. No, they're cool tables, but that's not what it's about.
No, absolutely. Cool. That's awesome. And of course, it's what its closest tube is Tottenham Court Road.
Covent Garden.
Oh, slightly okay. But it's not far from Tottenham Court Road, which of course, if you want to go and pick up some Forge World or what have you, it's there as well. And generally shopping. So
Forbidden Planet is pretty close. So you want to pick up your combat patrols or your
and if you want to eat,
what are they called?
You got Covent Garden. So
and just generally, I mean, it's between Hove and Covent Garden, and it couldn't be better. And the number of people who work there. There's also London's sort of biggest war games club, Seven Dials, is at Seven Dials, which is in Covent Garden. The London Wargaming Guild, LWG. So there's a lot of people there 2 or 3 times a week, just around the corner. It's open till 7 o'clock most nights. So I think loads of people in chats and things I'm part of are saying it's just ideal for people who are finishing work, got something in mind, go and pick up a particular paint, can of undercoat, glues, whatever a project might be. It's right there. So I would recommend that for anyone to go and have a look at.
For Londoners particularly, it's handy. And then if you're down in London, maybe it's worth popping into. You get a couple of bits. That's awesome. And of course, on top of that, they're doing all the usual wonderful stuff if you want to get yourself a Grand Cathay army, and frankly, who wouldn't? Then that'll be out with them. If you want to get tools and paints and glues and whatever else it is, they don't have a game that I want, but that's because I'm not sure that it's widely available in the UK. But we will talk about that game a little bit later, maybe.
Okay.
And but you can get plenty of other games on there. What was I looking at? Star Wars Shatterpoint was something I was contemplating. But yeah, you can buy all that there and plenty of other stuff too. Anyway, so yep. And if you want to support us, then you can order online and go through our link. And that
a thing I'd forgotten about, but mentioned when I was in there, is that if you go to one of their physical stores, you can log in with your username and password, and you can give your crystal code, or indeed our crystal codes if you so choose, and then you get double, I think it is, or whatever, however it works,
sure.
and you can use your credit in store.
That's cool.
Which is great.
I wonder if it makes it easier for them to go to Salute as well, because they'll obviously Salute coming up. They'll be at Salute. You can do your codes there as well.
Yes, and they Element do definitely have a presence there. Whether or not it will now be a bigger presence because
I think it will just make it easier.
Team on hand,
yeah, and of course don't forget because Artist Opus are all is conjoined. Like Byron is a link there that you've got Artist Opus. If you're going to buy from them as well, you can use our code, our link to do that.
The thing I was really impressed with was when I went in there yesterday, they already had a ample stock, no pun intended, of the new Pro Acryl, the Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl paints, which only came out at Adepticon. Yeah.
There's a lot of people
had stacks of them there. I decided to wait until I go to Salute. I was this close to picking them up there. So, and Element are the only people selling those in the UK.
Right. There we go. You want your Monument? I say. Well, we'll get onto that, but they were extremely busy over, and that was partly they had people on their in their stand as well. I think Louis Sugden was with them. And I was having a chat. I was quite happy just to see at their stand that they had all the Colourforge sprays, models sprayed in all the colours, which is something that I was like, can't look at a photo online and actually work out what the colour is going to be. So I walked past. I was like, "Oh, good! Like I can now see the green and the orange and what they look like." And he was like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "I'm not buying them here." Like my friend,
that is not a fun thing to take back through.
No,
TSA.
No, place either. So it's all good, wonderful, excellent. Well, that's Element Games done. So have you been managing to do any hobby in and amongst? Bringing the rubber home.
A new tiny person joining us. I have of a few things that the main thrust of that has been things we can't talk about just yet.
Sure.
We've got a few little of those projects which are just around the corner, which are tiny things which look great. Beyond that, not a lot. Trying to get myself kind of organised, really. What I have done is started to get the hobby space a little bit more organised. That was a bit of a sprint finish in those in those days before baby came along. It was like, oh, I've got a bit of time here. I think we're kind of in a good place. Great, I'll go do that. So I started putting up things like paint racks and organising the hobby space to try and make hobby as easy as possible, rather than having those little barriers to entry. Just try and get the old half an hour or so here. We go, well, I've got some time. Why don't I jump in on that? So it's the kind of slightly things that are quite satisfying, but are not that exciting. They're not like painting a new model or doing something like that. Haven't had a chance to do those. Just working on a couple of things. I have been getting a few paint recipes kind of nailed as well.
All right.
There's one for a new night household, because what I'm trying to do, I want to try and get a few paint recipes nailed for night households, because I'd quite like to have a little selection of those rather than have lots and lots and lots of nights for one house. One I want to try and get down is House Morbidia, which is a bonded house for Legio Mortis. So basically a red scheme with bone-coloured secondary colour. And I saw someone had done that online and thought, yeah, that's super cool. So I started making notes about that, ready to jump in on that. So more planning and preparation for when I can carve out a bit of quality time to do some hobby and do those things that hopefully I will be able to share on our various socials images shortly. What about yourself?
A smidge. So obviously away for a week. In the build up to that, making sure I spend time with the boy and the missus. Come back from that, making sure I spend time with the boy and the missus. On top of, we've got something coming up very soon, which I'm going to announce, which is amazing. But planning for that has taken some time, and chasing people up and things like that. So it's taken up a little bit of time. The various little things, but I kind of, this Blood Bowl team has been sat at my desk since like November, and I'm getting to the point of like almost finishing.
Oh, nice.
It's not amazing. But it's getting there. Oh, I missed a bit off that. So I've got trying to get the last little bits of that done. Been trying to sell stuff still. That's been taking up time, like eBaying things. Been watching Last One Laughing. The UK one is.
We virtually binged that in
Yes, we
a
did.
few days after Baby with the same thing, and that is
Bob Mortimer
strong.
might just be Britain's greatest comic of the last I don't know how long. The guy is a genius. So I've been doing things like that as well. So 1 week away has meant like 3 weeks of not doing a lot.
Fair.
Trying to keep a little hands in. What I did do, because I had the grand plan to hobby in the front room whilst we were watching TV together to get a little bit of extra time. Again, the veto has come out on that plan. It's not wanted. Doesn't appear the wife thinks I can keep glue on a big tray on my lap.
Okay.
However, I had already purchased the Daylight Company portable lamp.
Excellent.
From Element Games, in fact. So I now have a lamp with the reason for getting it now kaput. So what I'm thinking I might do, so I sometimes out in my van at work and have lunch breaks out. So I'm thinking I might get a box and I might make a little like section for the lamp so it doesn't roll around, and some hobby supplies, and then take some building work. I'm not going to do anything more than building, but I might just take that out with me to work sometimes. So if I do have a lunch break where I'm stuck in a lay-by somewhere or in a car park, an Asda or something like that, that I can break out the lamp and
I
build
think that's
models.
practical. I think that's a really good idea. I think you could make a good thing of that. The building in particular, or just like taking stuff off a sprue and cleaning the parts, ready to be glued somewhere else, or even if you can do that there. That actually, because you can do that in quite small chunks. Funnily enough, I had a half an hour between the end of work and needing to go and pick up our son from nursery, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to clip out a load of Titanicus Knights, and I think I got 3 of them lined up, clipped out in spec pieces, and now I can just sit and glue them together. And you think, well, that's half an hour very well spent. That's that sort of becomes quite efficient doing it that way. If you can sneak that in around other things where otherwise you'd be scrolling and losing
exactly.
yourself on your phone. That's a more satisfying way of doing it. Yeah, I'm here for it.
Yes, that's a plan. Certainly, if you're doing that at home, you need a bit of space. You need an organised hobby desk to be able to put stuff down and not move it around. I sort of like the idea as well. Who was I listening to? Someone talked to a Golden Demon painter. Can't remember who. And they had a shelf on their hobby desk, near their hobby desk, which is just random models. And for them, it was, I've been painting this model for ages, I need a break, or I just need to do something different. I'm going to get this model down and paint their, their face or this one bit of leather,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to do leather. That's all I'm going to do on this model, and it's not for anything. And I'm going to put it back up there, and another day I might repaint that, but it's just there. So that
Nice.
they had, I think it might have been Kaha, they had like 5 or 6 models up, just that they can grab at any time just to paint something, to try something out, something different. And I kind of like the idea of having a space in your hobby desk where you've just got a bit of building or something like that, like slightly more productive is not quite the right word, slightly more
Procedural,
yeah,
I would say. Something
yes,
it's something that it's a change, but it's
working
something that's
forwards.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's something that's more that you can sort of lose yourself in. I used to think that with certain things that where you didn't have to think too hard, you didn't have to plan it out too hard. A lot of the more monopose characters, you were like, yeah,
right.
I can just be building that and not have to think, how do I get the most out of the posing of this? How
Yeah,
do I get the this? And you just think, that became a bit of a chore. Well, not a chore, just you couldn't devote the time you knew you would want to make it satisfactory. Having something where that was taken away is quite nice. I tell you one thing, I'm doing this bit of sort of preparatory type of work. One thing that has been a bit of a quiet, like sleeper success was just getting a different like hobby bag. It's
right. Okay.
basically a fancy pencil case is what it was.
Sure.
It was like one of these things you get like from Muji or one of these sorts of places. It's a
Mm.
little zippy pencil case with a couple of compartments in. It was my father-in-law bought it for me as a Secret Santa for Christmas. Had a couple of paintbrushes in that I put on our Secret Santa list. Turns out he just thought, I'll give it to him in this thing. Game changer. I've got, before that, I had this crappy little bag that I was carrying stuff around in and there's sort of ferreting around in it. Now I've got this little zippy case. It's just organized, the stuff that's in
Sure.
it. So I can put my hand straight on a file, put my hand straight on this. And you think, why the hell didn't I do that? 10 years ago. It's a bit of
Yeah.
exaggeration, but you know what I mean? You've been living with it for however long and just getting yourself organized. And yeah, I mean, I'm in the position now where virtually all my hobby stuff has now gone out into the shed. So that's where that's going to be. But it means if I just want to do something quickly, I don't necessarily want to have to walk down the end of the garden to go and get
Yeah. No, that's fair
something.
enough.
So now I have a little portable set here in the house in the back of a cupboard that I can just get it out and start going. It's little things like that that actually
That's the
make things
kind of thing.
surprisingly easy.
That's the kind of thing I was looking at doing if I was allowed to hobby in the front room,
There you
but I'm
go.
not. So, so
Not
yeah,
yet,
but
or
I
not for a
am
while,
thinking.
perhaps.
No, I am thinking about doubling up on my tools that I want to use to build stuff now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I've got the travel set, and I've got
yeah. Basically,
the,
yeah, yeah.
the thingy set. So 90% of them are pretty cheap. Like there's not much expense in tools like that.
No,
Oh, it doesn't have to be, should I say? The only thing I might do is invest in some flat clippers. I'm
oh,
not going to
100%.
go God
Yep.
Hand, but maybe Bandai or something like that. I need to look
Tamiya,
into it.
Tamiya do some very good ones.
I'll tell you. Well, okay.
Redgrass Games ones are pretty handy.
Yeah,
So I
lots
hear.
of options. So
Yeah.
there we go. Wonderful
Well, that's
stuff.
it. That's what we've been up to.
Indeed. Should we take a break on that and then we can come back and talk about what's been going on in? Oh, I know. I suppose. No, let's add Adepticon in here, shall we? Because it is
Okay.
what I've been
Okay.
up to, and I didn't actually like. There wasn't a lot of gaming, so it's not going to be a huge thing. So travelled over to Adepticon. Travelled over on the Tuesday because wanted to get there for the preview. Wanted to make sure that I didn't miss any connecting flights or anything like that, and make sure if I'm delayed slightly, I can still get up there. All that jazz. Stayed over at Mr. David Whitehead's house after Eleanor fame. Haven't seen him in a couple of years, and only saw him for like an hour last time I was over anyway, because he was busy doing stuff. So did that and drove from his house. He's like literally halfway between Schaumburg and Milwaukee, so he's like there's almost zero difference for him between the
Lovely.
two venues. So got to lift up with him, stop at a shop, buy some food, get to my hotel, which is a block and a half away from the new arena.
Nice.
Uh, First thing about Milwaukee is it's a lot less busy than Chicago. Like, yeah, you might be in the town, but you're not. There's not a lot of people walking around at any one time. Maybe just that area, but a lot of hotels. It's one of those typical American convention centres. Some hotels have got the walkways across the road. Mine didn't. That's why it was a bit cheaper, but that's fine. Didn't bother me. Lots of eateries around it. Scharnberger was out. Yep, you can walk across the 4-lane, highway, or so 8-lane highway, to get to a few places. But ideally, you're getting an Uber to go to different places.
Okay.
Whereas, literally walk out the main entrance of this one, and half a block away is a place with multiple eating venues in there, like Seven Dials, or like what's the one on the south of the river, London, where you got all the food venues in
Borough Market.
Borough Market. That's the one. So yeah, you got that, and it's got a bar in there as well. So Third Street, or whatever it's called, Third Market. You got that, plus you got some bars, plus you got some steakhouses, and then you got some nicer places around it as well. Absolutely fantastic in terms of not having to eat convention food, which is A, not always great, B, very expensive. Um, and then evening food as well, somewhere to go and be. The new venue itself, they're using, I think, half or less than half of this convention centre. It's spread across 3 floors. Technically, there's another floor that they used for where the previews were and stuff. It wasn't used that much, and it's because we're using half the venue. It's like the front end of it, so it's a lot of walking. It had a road going between it, so the first floor you couldn't walk all the way across the front, but second and third floor you could. So once you kind of got that into your head, it had north and south markings for all the rooms, so N104 or what have you. Once you'd taken a little bit of time walking around, you kind of had an idea of where everything was. It's like, okay, cool. Third floor is the main hall with the vendors. Ground floor is, sorry, should I say second floor? I'm half American, half English here. So second floor slash third floor is that. Ground floor slash first floor was like where Heresy was, but where a lot of the other games were in there, and
When you say the games were in there, was that tournaments or was that
yeah. So
types of gaming, gaming events?
the main hall, the vendors were in the middle. To the left was mainly AMG games, so Star Wars mainly, but other games I think as well. And then to the right of that, the largest space was 40k Flex, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, some other Underworlds, and some other bits. Right down on the ground floor was Heresy. We're at the back of a room with Arena Rec and BattleTech and other games. They were the 2 main big areas. The and then there were some vendors outside in the hallways, and Golden Demon was kind of the other half of the building over the walkway over the road going through the middle. So Golden Demon was over there, so you just had to wander off to get it. Not hard. And then all the way across there were lots of little rooms that were cordoned off for either smaller game systems. So Lord of the Rings had one of these rooms to themselves. Legions Imperialis, Adeptus Titanicus, and Necromunda were in one of these rooms, decent sized room, and then they had smaller setup rooms for the painting courses. And there are a lot of hobby courses at this Adepticon. Whether it was more than normal, I don't know, but it felt more than normal because I think you're a little bit more obvious because you were walking past them all the time. So it took, and the like Fort Wapple, which is where you sit down and paint, was like round the corner and off a little bit, so you had to make your way there rather than walking past it each time. So the one thing about, and I'll start with the negative. One thing about the new venue is there's no one meeting place. So in the old venue, you would always walk past the bar, like almost always coming in and out. You go into your hotel room, you walk past either the bar or the lobby, depending on which floor you're on. So you would see people without having to look for them. You
Right.
would almost always, when you pass past the bar, there'd be someone in there you know. There were little spots where there were people, but you could walk for a few hours and not see people you know unless you went in specifically into areas where they were gaming, that kind of thing.
Right.
That's going to take some getting used to. What I think is going to happen is you're going to get there's areas in the hotel bars that are attached,
Mm-hmm.
um, or other venues that are going to become meeting places and hubs, and you're going to have to be a little bit more organised about meeting up
So
specifically in
rather
that
than a
kind of way.
centralized
Yeah,
location, rather than a single centralized location, is going to be
yeah, and it's
separated out. Okay.
yeah, and it's not like you always met everyone there, but in that bar, but it was an easy place for it to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
I go over, essentially traveling by myself, and there's people there I want to meet. And so Orion's Belt Mini, Stephanie, really like her. We get on well. I bumped into her at one point, handily near Golden Demon, and that was the only time we bumped into each other all show. Uh, Kelly Freiberg, another mate who I've known since I was going first time I went. I bumped into a little bit more because she was a little bit more walking around as well, doing that kind of stuff. But you weren't anywhere near the same level of like those interactions. The interactions were going to an event and finding people at that event, that kind of thing. But people are already talking about, oh, we're going to make this the place where we meet and stuff like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if people start having official meeting like that are
Okay.
on the system. So in this bar, this time, there might be limit who they're letting know, that kind of thing. But the space was really good. Oh, the other negative thing was I walked past so many open doors with people playing games, and unless you went in, you had no idea what was going on in those rooms because it's just a
Okay.
doorway that's open. So I know people had trouble finding where they were supposed to be. Like Space Hulk was right at the far end, round the corner. Like you can find it, but you won't happen upon it necessarily.
Right.
Um, so I think they need some. They have an app with a map, but they could have had maps out in the venue, and they also like something really simple. Is just
Signage.
at every door have what's on there in the weekend, like
Okay.
hobby class, whatever. Um, because that's not an that's handily. You give that to whoever's in that room for the first time and say, stick this up, that
Mm.
kind of thing, or at the very least have one for an area which had it out. At the end of the day, this was the first time they've ran the event at a new venue, and um, a couple of the queues they didn't really know where they were like kind of how to organise the queues because again the space has changed a lot and some signage and you know the other issues are people getting used to the venues being different.
Mm-hmm.
It ran, from what I could see from the outside looking in, it ran so smoothly for first time moving city, moving into this new venue.
The coverage
Uh,
I've seen, seeing various people talk about it, who have channels and similar, who went there and are coming back. I've not heard anything negative. It's all been generally
yeah,
praising of it, and it looked great. So that's quite an
yeah,
achievement, I think.
big
No
time,
obvious growing pains, at least.
big time. You still got hard floors in that main, in the main hall. You're not going to get around that. That's just nature of the beast. Um, the downstairs where the heresy room is was carpeted, which is cool. You do you want all the GW games in one area? Well, you'd need a massive space to do it. And is it nice in the way that like, Titanicus is off somewhere quieter? Potentially, you can hear each other talk, and you're not bustled. But in terms of space, there's a lot more space. Like it was busy. I think 10% busier, um, but it never felt too crowded in the whole time. You know, queuing up to get into the preview. There's a lot of people queuing up, but there's one or two real flash points I think they opened the vendor hall early because the queue was massive on the Saturday, and there were some delays with some security getting in. I mean, that is one thing people, you're limited on what you can take in. I walked in with drinks on me, but they were non-alcoholic, and it was one or two. You're not going to you're not going to be able to bring a crate of beers in, but that's a minor inconvenience, and in some ways, maybe a positive, that you can't have people get absolutely bladdered, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But yeah, the new venue, and they've done really well in picking it. I think they used half the size of the venue. Uh, Opposite on the other side to where I entered, there's a stadium and a theatre. They had on the Saturday night they had AEW wrestling in town. I didn't realise until I saw people posting that they were there. Bit gutted. Alice Cooper was on at the theatre like the week after
What?
that we left.
Oh, the week
So
after. Okay.
yeah, you want to see Alice Cooper in Milwaukee, just get him see if he does the line. But so there's like a lot more space to utilize. I have listened to the independent characters. They had some issues with going to some of the venues not being fully prepared for how many people were going to be there.
Okay.
Particularly on the Wednesday night. I think people were probably told, it starts Thursday properly. And they didn't. Some of the venues didn't have enough staff on the Wednesday night, or what have you. That's going to change very quickly. It's happened now. They know what to expect going forwards.
Yeah.
So, and I was talking. It was Kelly actually. I was like, "That's brilliant because I can go to the third market." Oh, there's a outside my hotel. There was a Subway. There was an Irish pub which did like a really cheap like afternoon lunch, just burger and chips for like $10. Um, there was Third Street Market. There was some other bits like you could eat fairly reasonably cheap. But Kelly was like, "Oh, I've gone the other way. Like, there's a lot of very good restaurants within a short drive or short Uber." So she went
That's, I
out
mean,
and
this is
ate
cool,
some
isn't it?
really good stuff. Yeah,
This is cool that you've got the choice. You've got the range there.
that's
It's
what you
not like
want,
it's
right?
not one or the other. You're not locked
Yeah,
into it. That range of choice there, from sort of higher end and everything in between. That's
yeah.
what makes those kind of events. To be honest.
It can really help for sure. Like in
Mm.
Schaumburg, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. You can pop out to different places, but it was very much get an Uber somewhere. Like in this, it's okay. Walk out here. Oh, I'll go this way this time. Oh, there's a pub there, or there's a sandwich shop, or there's whatever. Not like there's not a lot around it in those terms, but there's enough to cover what you needed. And I think that saying on the independent characters, Third Street Market, the first night shut like early evening, and then the second night opened a little bit later and stayed open, and then by the end of it they were staying open till late because that was a hub for people to go to. So next year, fully expect that to be, well, we might let's stay open, let the geeks come in. Maybe other events they have there, people don't come out quite so much. Maybe the nature of those events locks people in. Um, Really good to hear actually that someone on that podcast was saying that they were impressed with how civil people were. Even the event staff were like, you guys are nice, like, which is nice to see as well. Um, but yeah, in terms of the change, the only other thing was the travel, and I said at the start of the show that next year I could do it 2 days quicker. Two reasons for that. One, I don't think I'd stay for Golden Demon because um, although it's brilliant if one of your friends wins and wins unexpectedly or wins the sword, for me it's not. I'm not there for Golden Demon. I think it's brilliant, and I can talk to those guys. But also, they're in a bit of. If they win the sword, they are buzzing. But unless I'm going home with them, it's a very short thing. You know.
Mm. Okay.
Um, Whereas the I got a train into Chicago that night, stayed in Chicago, and then got to the airport the following day. But I think it's an hour and a half maximum. There's an hour to an hour and a half bus route that's a 9-minute walk from the venue that
Right.
takes you straight to the airport. So if I left at 3, I could guarantee being uh, Chicago in time to get the plane, because that was the risk, was if you flew particularly between the two, it wouldn't take much for you to miss your connecting flight.
Right.
And because that's an internal flight at Chicago, you've got to go through all the immigration, and O'Hare can be a bit of a nightmare.
Right.
So none of us really risked that. So that's main reason why I went a night earlier. Main reason why I came back a day later. So on top of 2 days away from the family, which is hard to do, it's also 2 nights more for hotels. It's more food, all that stuff as well. So
Well, it starts turning into it's not a weekend. It's a
well,
week.
yeah, I mean it's a full week. Normally it would be 5 days
Yeah,
at the old venue, but now it was a week for me, and it's like that. It makes a big difference.
it does.
So
Yeah.
I would probably do that, and I wouldn't. And I'd going over. I mean, if you know there's 3 or 4 of you going, it'll probably be not much more expensive just to get an Uber straight to your hotel
Right.
from the
Okay.
airport as a group
Yeah.
of you, because you can split that cost, and you
Yeah.
don't need to travel with that much stuff. Really, most of the time, even if you're bringing some models, so you can handle that, and it becomes very reasonable. So that's the kind of thing I do. Also, it can get cold up there, so you're
Yeah.
reducing the chance of Milwaukee Airport being snowed in or something like that, and
Yeah.
causing problems. And it turned out I was actually on the flight with Adam Troke, Steve Wren was there, James. There's about 5 or 6 GW staff guys,
Okay.
and they had a connecting flight up on the Tuesday, and we all got through customs in 15 minutes, which is unheard of for me with Chicago. So, especially considering maybe maybe they put their resources into flights coming from other countries. I don't know, but different parts of the airport. But yeah, I've never flown through customs like that before in Chicago. But I wouldn't want to
It's
risk that.
tricky, isn't it? Because you wouldn't ever want to. You wouldn't be able to be planning on that
I,
basis, would you? You'd
I
hope for the best, but
no
you can't.
last
You can't plan on it.
yeah, not last time we went. The time before we went, and it was an hour and and I joined not needing the toilet this queue, and towards the end of it, I was almost hurting, thinking I'm not joining the back of this queue because it hasn't stopped growing.
Right.
Um, so that's just the way it is. Yeah, but Adepticon in itself, the venue, the way they've moved there, absolutely brilliant, and I'm sure they'll work on smoothing any things out and improving things, and they've got so much room to grow there that it doesn't need to move for a long time.
Wow. Okay.
A long time. So massive big thumbs up to the organisers and everyone
That's. It
involved in it.
sounds superb. I mean, it really does sound like it's gone to. So you had a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, managed to sneak into the Space Hulk game, which is the only thing I really desperately wanted to do. Didn't get a ticket, but picked up someone else's ticket, and
Amazing.
it is amazing. They only run 6 of them or something. It's only 36 people can do it. So you've got to be on it and want it.
Yeah.
It's a massive shame that more people can't play it, but it's intense. It's a lot of time to keep running it. Would be unfair on the 4 guys who are doing a fantastic job. I hung out a lot. The 40k Flex, Carl Tuttle from the Independent Characters and Shell were running the 40k Flex, which was um, it was a casual match play environment of a couple of games. Just come, play. We'll try and, our aim is to make you have fun. We've prepared missions if you want to use them or use cards. Do whatever you need to do to have fun. They did try and just pair people off. Oh, you've only played 6 games ever. Cool. We'll put you in this side. Oh, you like play tournaments. We'll put you in this side. That kind of thing was done. So hang out with them. If I was going back, I'd probably offer to help run because I think they're going to extend that over 4 days going forwards. Um, when I see the Heresy guys, 2 different Heresy tracks. We had Zach on talking about that a little while ago. looked to be going really well. Lots of cool terrain. The one advantage of 40k moving to this tournament terrain setup they've got is there's lots of terrain out there that used to be used for 40k, which now isn't. So there is an availability of good terrain.
Okay.
I'm sure I didn't talk to Colin. Colin and Ewan and someone else went over. They said they had fun. Always hard traveling internationally to know the level of lists to take to these kind of things, even to any big event, I think, because it can be, you can get the diehards that go, but you can also get little Johnny's heard about it and it's his first event, because it's an official GW sponsored event that they can go to these things. So there's a real mix of stuff there, but some really cool Zone Mortalis boards. Then, of course, at various points, people got their big models out to use as well. Yeah, like in terms of gaming, like it seemed to run as well as before. Lots of options, fewer half-day options, which is the thing I really want. Is like to be able to go, oh, half a day here, have the rest of the day off to look around the event, go to the vendors hall, check out, meet mates, that kind of stuff. You can always check out. You could get into the venue late nights. You could always like wander around Golden Demon really late night when there weren't people there, which is good, which is always helpful because the queues are huge just to line up to queue to walk around the cabinets for Golden Demon. The vendors hall was good. They're talking about bringing all the vendors into the vendor hall, maybe expanding it its size. There's some really cool stuff out there at the moment. Maybe next show we can talk about some of the stuff. There's a Kickstarter going on or about to happen. Can't remember which for mini wargaming have got involved in it, but it's for tiles, like essentially Mighty Empire tiles. They're all clipped together, and you can add bits to and design bits with holes for magnets in, so that you can magnetize models onto things like that. Looks really cool. I haven't looked at the Kickstarter properly, but like
that sounds jolly dangerous. I hadn't come across this one. Okay,
no,
interesting.
fairly
I mean, that's the
new.
beauty of conventions, isn't it? That you can wander around and discover stuff that has just passed you by, or that you wouldn't have otherwise done.
Well, there's the game I want to buy from Element is called Necro Molds, and
Okay. I've heard about this.
have you heard
Yeah.
about this?
Okay.
So yeah, you
Yeah, I
play a
have. Yeah.
wizard. Everyone plays a wizard. You have a pot of plasticine. You have these books which are molds, and when you summon a creature, you put the plasticine in and make the mold. And bigger creatures, more powerful, need more plasticine, so limit what you can do. And then when you kill someone's thing, you've got a little stamp and you squash there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
in a few years' time, James is going to want to play that without like make up some rules for it. Necro molds has gone on my list of I will buy that for the boy at some time.
There's been variations on that. That was it was probably a late 90s.
Was it?
There
I've
was an
never seen
idea a
it.
bit like that as a board game or
Right.
something like that. And I think it's
Oh,
someone's taken that idea and run with it. I seem to remember James Hewitt talking about it being quite clever. So to hear it coming around as a thing, and funnily enough, I saw a
oh,
YouTube roundup of it, what was there, and they mentioned that one again. So yeah, that's quite
they're
cool.
talking about that their third print run or something,
Right.
and
Okay.
expansions, and it can play as a full battle game, tabletop battle game, if you wanted to, I think. So, but like Shell Tuttle was talking about, like for her students and stuff, it's like something she's going to get. I'm thinking about James. I want to get Necromolds and I want to get Blitzbowl, which is only
Yeah.
available in thingy. It's in German now as well as Barnes and Noble.
I
But
still find that bonkers that they don't that and things like Combat Arena, Combat Arena, Blitz Bowl, those sort of
yeah,
small scale things, perfect for playing in pubs, that sort of thing.
yeah. But
I
I'm
just find
also
that bonkers
thinking
they don't sell it elsewhere.
again. James is only 3 now, but in X amount of years' time, to do something that's much simpler. Um,
Yeah.
in that respect. It's going to be something. So you get to see things like that. You get to AMG had their demo tables out in the hall, but things like Trench Crusade, they actually had a demo they had a room where they did their demos, so you could
Right.
sign up for demos, go downstairs, and they had like 6 or 7 tables out to play demos on. So Shatterpoint was the one that tried for thingy and tempting, but I don't know if anyone local is going to play it. But who knows?
Right.
Maybe. Also, I'd have to paint stuff like it looks in the films. Always a bit tricky.
Otherwise, it's not. Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
go do your own scheme. I had heard that Trench Crusade broke some sort of record for most demo games or something. They sounds like they
Well,
had really sorted themselves out for that.
yeah, they definitely did. They had might have been 8 tables downstairs, and they had like it was like sit down. Here's the rule. Here's the thing. Cool. Like there's 3 people around. Come and ask us if you're struggling. You should be able to pick it up. So that's how they did theirs, rather than like Arena Rex had an arena on their booth and watched a turn or two played out. That kind of thing. So, but Thomas Pirinen was on the Trench Crusade stand with, I assume, the guys who the other guys who were working on it as well. I didn't catch their names. Nice to chat to those guys for a little bit, actually. Trench Crusade's one of those games where I'm like, I could do. I only like 1 or 2 of the factions. I'd have to build. I think I'd have to build a specific board for it, and I'm not sure that that's gonna. Maybe, well, who knows? If I can get someone at the club to maybe do that side of things, I might get a little. It needs to, for me. I haven't properly played it. I've had a little look at it, but I think for me these games need to be almost contained. Like I don't want to get into Trench Crusade and have to keep buying stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
If I get Shatterpoint, I almost think I buy X number of um, you know, squads or whatever they're called
Teams.
to make
Yeah. Whatever they're
teams
called.
to
Yeah.
make the army, and then that's it. And then we
Mm,
play it.
mm.
Therefore, I don't have to keep learning new stuff, so I can bring it out like a board game.
Yeah, and with those sorts of things that are contained into teams or squads or whatever,
Yeah,
the sort of skirmish games, you can treat them like a board game, and you don't, unless you're attending events, you don't have to treat it like a meta or something like that where you're
no.
having to chase it. Not at all. Whereas, I mean, you could do Trench Crusade like that, but it doesn't feel like it's the same because it's more open ended. I suppose you could put a
Oh,
couple of
you definitely could. I
forces
think 'cause
together. Yeah,
they're going to reveal, do new stuff, aren't they, at various points?
yeah,
But in in I if I play Trench Crusade, I want to play it the same way that you play Necromunda and
yeah,
Heresy to a point. That you're like, we're not going to try and do this, and we're not going to try and do that because I won't. I just won't want to be part of that. It's
yeah.
not how I'd want to play it. But yeah, so it was dangerous walking around there. You would have hated it because there was just paint line after paint line.
Oh my
Duncan
god.
was there. And they've got their new paint line, their new additions to their paint line coming out
Yeah,
soon.
that's grimdark things. I'm excited by that. Yep.
Absolutely, that booth always had people out there painting it. You had the Pro Krill guys. You had Turbo Dork. You had you name them. They were all there. Element were there. Artis Opus were there with their
Yeah.
new egg holders, which I think it's one of those things. If you if you're happy with a bit of cork, then you're happy with a bit of cork. If you want something to hold a model that's a bit more engineered, I think they're pretty good. Um, but everyone's going to have their opinion on that. If you don't like it, you don't buy it. Simple as that. But showing
Yeah.
off their techniques as well, which is cool. Taro sold out of his stuff fairly quickly.
Yeah.
As he wants to do. I want to go back. It's quite frustrating that I'm at this position where I'm probably not going to be able to go back for a little while. It will
Right.
take. It was an unfortunate mix-up, shall we say, where I ended up paying for a hotel room by myself, which doesn't help expenses, but it costs. It cost a fair amount. Having had some health issues over the last couple of years, and there's still being investigations. Meant my health insurance was like 5 times as much as it would have been
Of course.
beforehand.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. I say the extra hotel room in Chicago. That's another £100 that you don't need to spend. Like
It adds
so,
up, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah. And it goes from being manageable to like, oh, this is I
It's just a
certainly could have done
commitment
it
now. Yeah.
probably 2/3 of the cost with ease. Had a been slightly more organised and had a little bit more fortune with the rooms, and potentially lower than that as well. So, and I sold a lot of my old stuff to pay for that.
Yeah. Okay.
So going forwards, I'd have to just squirrel some money away, and I've still got plenty of stuff I want to sell. So I might just start a little fund off to the side so that one day, 1 year, I can go, oh, why don't you go away for some time with your friends? Which Emma was going to do this year, but that friend is now life's happened, so they're not doing that. So, but it's hard.
Life can happen the other way as well, and it's them not being able to do a thing because you didn't think it was going to be a thing.
Yeah, you want to be able to jump at
that. That's a difficult decision to make, of course. That's means allowing, but yeah, I agree. I mean, you say it's a balance of those things, but it's interesting that it is sufficiently compelling, particularly a multi-day event. I mean, I'm comparing it with things that I don't think are strictly comparable, but even with Salute coming up this weekend, it's a one-dayer, and by the time that one day is finished, I've had that. For something to be sufficiently compelling that it works for, is it 3 or 4 days?
4 days.
4 days.
Thursday, Friday,
it's sufficiently
Saturday,
compelling that it can fill that time, and you're super keen to go back, even at that level of sort of expenditure. That says a lot about the event.
I mean, it helps for me in that I've been going over. So I went to Gen Con 13 years ago, and then my first Adepticon was 11 years ago. So I've also developed relationships with a lot of people over there. It's weird though that all the people I knew through Warhammer originally, and then Age of Sigmar, and through these other things I'm doing, very few of them are playing in the events anymore. They're organisers at different levels. So they're either running a single event, or they're in charge of the whole Age of Sigmar, or Dustin is still in charge of even more than that, or someone else has taken up doing some 40k. So all of a sudden I've gone from walking up to a lot of games and now walking up to the organisational tables, or people running classes that I've become friends with as well. And there is something to. Dave Witek and I have talked about doing an After and Or something with After and Or and charging a small fee to do it. Something that's very reasonable. But if you can fit a decent amount of people in a room and charge to say $10 for a period of time, that can add up. And some of these money people are making from doing the paint classes is a lot of money. Like, Andy Wardle worked 4 days over there. So that's hard. Don't get me wrong. He's 4 days of teaching for hours at a time is not easy.
And all the preamble that goes into it beforehand as well, and building it up. Yeah,
for sure. I know Neil Hollis is doing maybe 1 or 2 classes to essentially pay for the trip. And again, it just takes that level off what you're doing. We can't all do that. Whether we would get anyone sign up if we did something like that without the show coming back, who knows? But potentially things we could do certainly can fit 4 people in a room in my hotel room, like 4 very big beds. They're 2 very big beds. I've had 5 in a room before for a Gen Con. So,
particularly an event like that where hopefully you are out meeting people, chatting, doing stuff. You're not. The
room is for story
stuff. You're enjoying the room. Yeah, exactly. It's not like you're luxuriating in the room. And if it takes, reduces it by 75%, that's a big deal.
It makes a big difference. So, as a whole, I think the event was a massive hit. Maybe we'll talk about whether the preview was a hit in a little bit. But should we move on?
Yes, let's.
Okie dokie. So what have GW been up to? Let's do it in some form of order, shall we?
I like that kind of structure, attempting to bring that to play.
Was Astacrone out last time we?
He was not. We last discussed a certain Raven Guard, Blood
Indeed, I
Crow.
didn't think
I
so.
believe last time. I don't think Astacrone. Astacrone was the one coming along.
Do you like?
I was looking forward to him. Yeah, I was. I mean, I was always going to. It's an interesting direction. I think they took with him. I think very cool interpretation of what Blood Angels could be, particularly this being a character that was around in the first iteration of Heresy, and we saw some of the sort of profile sketches that Rachel tends to do. So to then see that realised now in this version of the character, I thought was very cool. He looks chunky. He looks quite big. And when I say chunky, I don't mean as in a chunky arm or anything like that. I mean as in it looks like quite a large, imposing model. But goodness me, they've gone to town with the filigree.
They have, haven't they? I don't envy the sculptor looking at the picture that Rachel drew and thinking, how do I do that hair?
Yeah,
but yeah,
completely.
no, it's one of the most blood angels you'll ever blood angel, isn't it?
I
like it.
I think I actually prefer on just looking at it purely as a model. I think I prefer it to something like Ralderon, which I did not expect it to be. I think there's a sort of commanding and imposing nature. I always find axes are a funny thing to have on a blood angel. I don't associate sort of axes like that as a stereotypical weapon. And similarly, the integration of the hand flamer wasn't what I was expecting really. And I think it works an absolute treat on this model. The filigree and the ostentation works. Yeah, love it.
I think I might be with you on the preferring it to Raldron.
It's strange. I wasn't expecting that, but I kind of do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to have a blood angel that is all this, and then have some blood angels which are less than this. I think that's good. Like choose your poison.
And sort of interesting that a character that is arguably of higher renown in the lore and is certainly of higher rank and status has actually got a more subdued look, suggesting it's a choice. But I think that's quite cool. You got that variety rather than being the linear relationship of well, the higher ranked you are, the more cool stuff you have because you've leveled up in your video game.
A reflection of character. Absolutely.
Indeed, yeah.
Which is super cool. Okie dokie, we got some little stuff. So, Heresy Thursday, Mechanicum Knights. Little knights in plastic. I've got quite a few of these in resin, which makes me sad.
I similarly picked up a few of these in resin, and you're like, well, okay, because you kind of had to, because they were super cool. It was the only way you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely.
But to see them in plastic, yes, please.
Let's add that in with Atropos Knights as well, which again got a few of them, and the Knight Acastus as well. Yep, I got them in resin as well, and then something I don't have in resin, little Krios tanks and Arachnos tanks. So 3 weeks of some awesome Legions Imperialis Mechanicum.
We knew the Arachnos and the Krios variants were coming in. Interesting that in the box of the Krios, that 2 of the weapon options you only get 4 of.
Right.
I think that's just smacks of they just couldn't quite eke the space out on the sprue. Yeah. And I don't think that's a big deal, to be honest. I think you can make that work.
I don't think it's a big deal at all. I think
particularly Mechanicum.
Even if you wanted all one gun, you just build 4 with one gun and just say it. Like, I don't think at this level that's that much of an issue.
No, and I think you could mock something up with bits quite easily to do the others and say, hey, these are experimental versions. That's very Mechanicum. And I think, I don't think that's such a big deal.
Those Karachnos are just thinking little bits, but hey, it's all fun. It's all fun. The knights, I mean, even the Mechanicum Knights. That's so cool. So cool.
Particularly the Asterius. Very glad to see. I mean, I felt they were prohibitive in the in resin in terms of cost. They were just eye-watering. The cost of those, particularly the Questoris ones, the sort of pounds for points relationship ratio was a bit agonising, and I sort of felt that, and it was perhaps a little bit less, but I just think having access to be able to, and now having them in plastic, and particularly probably true of the Atropos actually, with them being in plastic, are the price points going to be such that you could actually do a full lance of just the Mechanicum Knights, whereas I think you would have resisted that in resin, unless you really went hell for leather. I just love the idea of doing the more Mechanicum aligned Knights, all in Mechanicum aligned armors, which could be amazing.
That would be quite expensive.
In resin, yeah.
For sure. So it's good. Again, like, it was nice to see the Mechanicum Knights come out, like confirmation that they were coming, because was that guaranteed? Not necessarily. Like, you would hope it would happen, but more of the same. You're not going to. Some of our Heresy Thursdays are things we know that we're going to get. That's just the nature of the beast, right? But we can move on to one which surprised a lot of people. We got some tarantula missile batteries.
Yes, indeedy.
Which is interesting.
I think you could have speculated based on Legions that they were going to come. Did I expect them to come now and in this format? No, I didn't.
I think that's the thing, right? 2 in a box, some not amazing rules. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know whether there's anything to read into like what's going on there, but I like it. They're cool.
It feels very Necromunda to me, and this looks like the sort of thing that they've been releasing in Necromunda, where they've had sentry guns, they've had all sorts of things coming out for that in that sort of that box size, if you like, where you get 2 sprues in there. I'm here for it. I think it's going to make a bit like the Arvis. It's going to look cool. I can see people having a bunch of these as just terrain and objectives and
it's also
whatever else.
Come with rules available as a free download,
suggesting they're going to be tweaked.
They already have rules, so it will be nice to see them updated in the future at some point. And then we move on to the slightly less specific stuff for Heresy. Necromunda might have got a Heresy model.
Oh, well, yeah.
Vandalf the Fallen. What is this guy? Just wanted to say it. Really. I think he's amazing. Such a cool model.
Really do. I completely agree. I think the touches that they put in. I mean, we've applauded Necromunda, the designers of Necromunda before, but they continue to knock it out of the park with their characterful models, and this one particularly. What I felt was really interesting was how a lot of their models they've done with Necromunda are very, very faithful to the artwork that they've done.
Yeah.
Where someone has done a pencil drawing or an ink drawing, and they're incredibly rich. Those. This one in particular takes the pencil one and then runs with it. Actually extends quite a lot of what the character in detail is, which I thought was an interesting departure and has really paid off. They've kind of turned it up to 11, and I think it nailed it.
It'll be interesting to see kind of what the parts breakdown is, because I could see certain armies using this as an objective, or it's an expensive way to do it, don't get me wrong, or as a specific, like, a Black Shields thing, or there's some uses here for this model. As I say, not a cheap way of getting something like that, but a pretty
a lone operative or something like that, or something who's like a special forces kind of character who's been behind lines for a while, whatever. There's a number of ways of interpreting him. I mean, cool model. The painters clearly had a lot of fun with it as well. It just smacks of something where all the different departments working in the development of that had fun and were given the freedom to run with it. I mean, the little Ninth Legion blade painted onto the model.
Yes,
great, lovely. Didn't have to do that.
Absolutely,
very cool.
We've got. If you're heading to Warhammer World, there's a new reason to go to the exhibition.
Oh yes, well
Massive
remembered. Yes,
battle for Magma City. It looks fantastic.
I would love to see this in the real.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, looking at the main photo, you could be forgiven for thinking it's just 20 foot wide.
Yeah,
Like, like you really could, and it's like the main one. But of course, the Mechanicum stuff isn't in 20 mil. The Dark Mechanicum stuff, so it's got to be little models. Um,
yeah.
but it looks so good. Really love it.
Really packed it with the models as well.
Yeah.
They've made it really dense. I think you could have easily skimped on that, and then the amount of detail actually in the city itself, using all those terrain kits and stuff.
Mm,
Yeah, the colours,
yeah.
the painting on it is fabulous. Sounds really interesting that they positioned it differently to a lot of the others as well. Because I noticed that that's what I find really interesting. The exhibitions in there that they're often at different heights. So some of them are pitched really quite high, so that your eye level when you're stood,
Yeah.
you're seeing everything at the level of the models. Whereas this one, very different. They've pitched it very low, so that you're getting a top down view over
No,
something like this.
it's
Like you've got
cool.
an overview, like an aerial view. And I think that could be super cool.
For sure, yeah. There's some quite clever choices they've got with some of those kits they have up there, which is
If I was
awesome.
being if I was being picky,
Mm.
if I'm splitting the most minutiae of hairs, I find the loyalist Titan color scheme slightly off the mark. Talk about being a rivet counter, but that they don't look like Legio Tempestus to me. They look like Titans in Legio Tyrannus, in House Tyrannus colors. Even the knights, I feel,
Right.
are they fully House Tyrannus? I think that's open to interpretation. Knights being what they are, and heraldic, etc. To me, from my understanding of them, perhaps there's more white than there should be blue. Like I say, I'm being incredibly nitpicky. The
You
overall
are.
effect of this thing is incredible. So let's put all that to one
And they're going to
side.
do a lot of painting very quickly on those.
Absolutely, they probably had about a week to put this together. So yeah, let's put all that to. Let's stop being a dick about it.
No, what else was there? Heresy at Golden Demon. I didn't get
Yes.
a full look. I just wanted to talk about the models, really. I didn't get like once models got. I took a load of photos, put them up on Instagram, but once it got busy, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And other people
I
are doing
can't go
it
anywhere near it.
better
Yeah.
than me. So yeah, I was just not queuing up to do that. But there's some fantastic models here. That Azek Aramin sculpt is an old sculpt, and I know they've
Yeah.
played around with it, but my word. And LK's Fulgrim. There are a couple of Fulgrims around.
Yeah.
I'm, I'm sort of surprised and not surprised there weren't more. There was one point very early on in the 40k section that they put all the Angrons next to each other.
Right.
At that point, when there was very few relative models in the thing, there were 6 Angrons in a row
Wow.
of varying qualities, but yeah, a very popular model.
Trying to
Which is
see where they got the
understandable.
list. Yeah.
Very understandable. We didn't talk about the preview because we didn't get a preview. So after all what we were saying beforehand, if you look at the preview as it was, so 40k, we got the next books coming out. We're going to get a model for each of the chaos things. Cool, normal preview stuff. Big reveal, Space Wolves, 2 units of the character. We're going to be getting 11 kits for Space Wolves. I think it was 11 that Lemtroke said. In and of itself, the big reveal being Space Wolves and then just showing us 2 units of the character isn't that big a reveal. If you look at
I thought
Age
that was
6,
a well. I thought it was interesting that they gave the sample miniature to people in the room, as they did when they
yeah,
announced the
I think they
current
just
version of Heresy, where that was the launch of an entire game system an addition of an entire game system. Here, they're giving the same treatment to the launch of an army.
The first time they did it was with the
Still,
System of Battle, which was the launch of an army.
Yeah, okay.
They've done exactly the same thing before. So
with the launch of an army, yes, okay. I would say that was
although
the launch of an entire range.
Yeah, indeed. And maybe we'll swing back to that point. At Age of Sigmar, we got the next book that's coming out, General's Handbook, and some information about some armies. Cool. Okay. What else do we have? Cool, I can't even remember. There was another game system. Blimey.
Kill Team.
Kill Team.
There was Crusade Armageddon for 40k.
Oh yeah, Crusade Armageddon for 40k as well. Kill Team. We got the new box. Cool, brilliant, awesome. Not a new edition though, just a new box. The next thing.
But so I think the biggest winner was Old World, wasn't it?
In Old World, we got the Wood Elves, who got no new models, who arguably are the one race that don't need new models because some of their characters are still some of the best models they do. They're just in a terrible material. The Beastmen getting one new model, and then getting Cathay, which completely stole the show.
Completely.
The winner was Cathay, which was in the first set of reveals because it was Old World. The new base troops are amazing. The mounted troops are so cool. The big statues are. If I hadn't got a Sons of Behemoth army, I'd be doing it with them. The cannons are cool. The models are beautiful. The lantern. Balloon is stunning. The whole range working together is, I think, Old World. Now they've got to this point. If what we believe is true, and GW are trying to, cut the lines between game systems, which may be happening with the way they're handling demons in 40k. Demons being the one weird one, means like rats, undead, those kind of armies will need range refreshes to put them in Old World because they're in AOS looking
don't need
like
their own identity that differentiates it completely from that thing. Yeah.
So if that's the case, and it's a big if, it means Old World players, I think, can look forward to what you're going to get is, okay, a new book for this one will give you a few bits, but the next book is either a revision of an old race or a new race that comes with a complete line of stuff. So it's going to take years, don't get me wrong, but Cathay is, and in Cathay they've obviously been working on it for donkey's years since the announcement. Kislev should probably have quite a few.
I was thinking that. I was trying to think of something where they've got that same scope, because there's a couple of markers here, and I've seen a few people discuss this. What it represents is significant, hugely significant, I think, because the original scope as it was presented was, hey, we're going to look at effectively the Empire, the old world, this part of the old world, and we're going to really focus in on that. And then they go, but here's Cathay, because sometimes they trade with this, and you think, cool. So that suddenly opens the door to looking at quite a lot of other areas. So I'm immediately wondering, is that why we haven't seen the Shadow Realm in Age of Sigmar? Because we're going to see a lot of Dark Elf type of, imagine a Dark Elf kind of move like this, which I thought was completely off the table because they were on the other side of the world in this period. So I think there's some really interesting things they could do.
The problem with that is Dark Elves should be part of the Old World because they still did raid the Old Worlds. So, but we know right from the start you already had Cathay and Kislev resources for Total War Warhammer 3, and they talked a lot about Kislev and Cathay when they announced the Old World, and it seems they then pulled back and tightened what they were going to do. So they must have assets for Kislev also.
Yeah.
So Kislev seems, it would be amazing if they didn't release a new Kislev army. Kislev is still grounded in the Warhammer that we know. Cathay gets to do something completely different than the old world setting, and yet still feel part of it, which is amazing, which is really well done, but gets to feel brand new. I don't think we can get that with any armies, but I think it must show that their feelings about our world now are very different from when they pulled right back and said we're going to release 9 factions and everything else is going to be you'll get rules but you won't get models. I think that's probably going to change. So I do think at some point you will get Dark Elves, you will get Undead, you will get Skaven, but it'll be in the way they want to do it. Chaos Dwarfs probably before those because again, well, unless they do something for Age of Sigmar, it's very different. So I think for our world long term, and we're talking years, it looks very healthy at the moment that they're going
Agreed.
to put those resources into those. Say a redesign of Undead or what have you. Tomb Kings, and we've already got that. But they will expand on that as well. I think as we go, Liz and Men will be really interesting.
But to
But who
launch
knows?
an entirely new range where there's been nothing before is a hell of an undertaking, and
It's
they've done it. And I find
it,
it fascinating that it's the first time where so much was portrayed in Total War 3 in such detail, and they've done such a good job. I mean, several people I've spoken to about this at varying degrees of engagement with the hobby in general,
mm,
who said that these are, in many ways, they've almost exceeded what the video
right.
game was capable of doing, which I find fascinating. That you could they've somehow managed to capture all the character of that and go further with it with the model
Sure.
range, and to do that with so many kits, yeah,
I think
a
I
hell
think
of a job.
they've got the advantage with Cathay that they have with Age of Sigmar when they release new stuff, in that there's a very limited scope of what's expected. So
Yeah,
yes, we do have that Total War Warhammer, we have those pictures, but there's freedom around that, and I think we've talked before about how 40k there are a lot of restrictions now because
yeah.
you've got 30 years of built up imagery that how much difference can you do with Space Marines? Even with a whole range refresh, they made the Primaris,
Yeah,
which is cool. But like there are, and it's new, but it's still not fully new. So overall, this preview, like Space War's got a massive cheer. Don't get me wrong, I'm a massive Space War fan. It's going to be expensive, but hey, let's see
and
what
from what I can see as well, and from what they've shown and the reaction I've seen from it, people are saying that is one of the best and most successful reinventions, if you like, reimagining,
they
refreshes
smashed it.
of a Space Marine range. And when
Adam,
most people
Adam,
are immediately holding up the Blood Angels and being like, guys.
yeah,
So
Adam
yeah,
Troke
they,
said it's one of the best refreshes they've done. Um,
interesting.
which is cool. Give me Wolf Scouts again, give me Terminators again, and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean that's cool. But again, they didn't show us much of that. They showed us a lot of the Cathay, which was super cool. But as I say, by far stole the show.
Yeah,
But essentially, when you break it, when you look at what it is for an Adepticon preview, it felt lacking.
that's
Like,
surprising to me. Looking at it
well,
in the
right,
morning, and I was waking up a bit with feeding duties as it was. I was glancing at it and I thought, well, there's quite a lot here, and particularly Cathay.
is
If
there?
they didn't have Cathay, I think it would have felt like a real miss.
Right, so yeah, okay, so I'm with you. So a kill team box, that's cool, and if that comes out in the preview, you're like, awesome, brilliant. That's a real solid reveal. Um, 40k reveal. Sorry, the Age of Sigma reveal was cool, but not like no one was blown. No one was coming away talking about Age of Sigma.
No,
Right? It was okay. Yeah, we're going to get that. We kind of knew.
that was clearly playing a support role. I'm
Very
comparing
much.
this a little bit with there was a preview. I forget what the specific marker was. The preview where the Eldar Phoenix Lords were there. So it was a chunk of Eldar range came out, and they did Krieg at the same time. So it was Eldar and Krieg. So two 40k releases
late
recently.
last year.
Yeah, that was lauded as one of the best. People went bonkers for that preview and said they have nailed this. They've absolutely. That arguably had two big headliners, if you like, and then a bunch of support things around it. This is similar in that you had the Space Wolves and Cathay. Was there enough Space Wolves? That's a debate. You could argue maybe a couple more kits would have been nice to see. A couple more parts of the range.
There we go. 25th November 2024. Let me have a little look at someone's.
That preview was considered. People said they've absolutely nailed this.
Right.
And I'd say this was sort of comparable.
Hold on, bear with me. So we saw the front page of the Codex, the cover of the Codex for Eldari, Warp Spiders, Fire Dragons, Swooping Hawks, Lycus, who's brand new, Fuegan, Baroth, Azerman. Right? Seven units.
7 kits. Yeah.
7 kits. One of whom is a major character who was brand new. What we got for Space Wolves was 2 base units and a non-named character.
Unit. Yeah.
Right. That less than half of what they showed us with this Eldar preview. I think that's my point, right? It was like awesome. Oh, cool. Oh, right. Leave us wanting more, right? So, Age of Sigmar was like cool preview, great. Kill Team was like that's cool preview, cool, well done. 40k was like awesome, but we still haven't seen what you like. Don't get me wrong. Going back to Armageddon, cool. Here's what's coming with the next new books. Yeah. Space Wolves, cool. Can't wait to see what you show.
Yeah, okay.
Warhammer was, Oldwell was, we knew that was coming. Blimey, we didn't know that was coming. Jaw dropping. But for a game system that relatively few people play, it was first. In some ways, it should have been last because of the impact. But Space Wolves was last because that was their big thing. So, and if I look back over the course, it felt more like a November preview. It didn't feel like Games Workshop don't have a flagship event anymore.
No.
They support Adepticon more than they support anything else. It has Golden Demon. It has massive competitions. Previously, it used to be where they released. What's the big thing that's happening this summer?
Yeah.
What's the main release this summer?
You and I spoke about this, or I questioned this in our conversation sort of shortly after. I feel like the time between them previewing a thing and then it actually going up for pre-order has shortened. There's no set thing.
It's more month to 2 months.
Yeah, those schedules change wildly, and that's fair enough. Of course, it is. Shouldn't be set in stone, as in locked in some way. Yes, the whole point of it is flexible. It comes in drips and drabs. But I feel like certain things are being shown, and the time to release is a lot less. And I'd imagine that's a conscious decision. So, like you say, they're not previewing what they would have done previously, where they're previewing 3 months out ish. So we don't know what's happening in summer. No. Who can speculate?
So someone pointed out actually that a while ago one of the summer previews wasn't actually done at Adepticon. It was done in their May preview slot. So cool. I got that wrong. Didn't realise that, or forgot that. Whatever. So their May preview slot used to be their Warhammer Fest preview slot. But if it's late May, it gives you late June, late July. So that's 2 months. Like May, June, July for their release to come out, which fits within a shorter slot. But also, we did have some pretty decent reviews at Warhammer Fest when we went up there for the last one they did. I can't remember what was shown last year, but what I have talked about on the show before, I believe that they've got too many previews, and some of them have sucked. frankly.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's an element of both where the timings maybe work better in that respect, but also it bulks out a May preview. And again,
Yes.
I'm not saying we're definitely getting a new Horus Heresy edition. I'm asking the question of where's your big summer release, because it's not an Age of Sigmar book,
No.
right? And it's not
And
based on
Heresy was notable by its absence in that preview.
yeah,
So I
notable
mean,
by its absence, and notable again by the fact we haven't got a book. There are lots of rumors out. Like there's again, I'm not going to put my mortgage down on there being a new edition of Heresy. But if you gave
I
me
would
£1
also
and said I had to put it down, I'd be putting it on a new edition of Heresy because
indeed, and it feels like an
critical mass
educated
of
guess.
yeah.
I agree with that. Yeah, completely a critical mass of that, and I'd say it's a better than. I think it's more likely than not likely that would be happening. However, against that is they can have the best laid plans, but
Oh,
like
for
happened
sure.
with Legions, things can happen. I
Yeah.
mean, goodness knows what the impact, and this wouldn't have affected it now, but there's a lot of talk about international trade being,
Oh, yeah.
you know, that's
Well,
in an interesting place that we haven't been in for 100 years.
I,
So
it
suddenly
is,
plans can change.
but
You know,
that's. I wonder if that might just affect one country's release times, and would they choose to? I mean, don't get me wrong. There's knock-ons, but
we're in uncharted.
Uncharted. Well, yeah. I mean,
A phrase we're all going to hear
so many times.
agonizingly repeatedly for
I mean, but
uncharted territory here.
as we
Who
talk,
knows?
he's talking about pausing it all and stuff, and yeah,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
uncertainty is never good. But what GW have done, again, the other thing they've done recently is those shorter windows are in part, I think, because they're making sure the stock is there
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do it. So they don't have a Sylvaneth, they don't have a Legions Imperialis, they don't have a, there's been a number of them over the last 4 or 5 years where things have been we've like, where is this thing? And it's not
yeah,
arrived. So I think they're waiting. They've got it all in. They do that, which again feeds potentially into a shorter window, all that kind of stuff. So uh, I would think they're going to want a big summer release because they always do it. And I
yes,
tell you what, managers of shops want a big summer release because their shops, the Games Workshop shops particularly, their their targets are set on the previous year. So it was
yes.
always hard enough when they didn't have a 40k release in the summer, but no release would be even harder for them. So who
I
knows?
would have bet money,
Yeah,
even though we knew a week ahead of the Adepticon thing that Heresy was not listed on there of what they were going to preview. I would have still bet money that there would have been a little cheeky teaser, a little teaser video at the
that's
end of it, not like they did with Legions and so, like Legions Imperialis. I would have bet money they did that, and they didn't. That's fine, and that's what we're reflecting on here. As you say, save it for another event. Similarly, I think it would have been cool, based on everything you've just said, which I completely agree with. It would have been quite cool had we seen a little preview of
we
more
can't.
kits of the Space Wolves.
Well, again, we don't know where we are in the times on that. Like just yeah. I'm at that point now. It's like, okay, cool. Well, if I'm going to get base troops, like I've got a load of intercessors. Do I need to sell some intercessors? Like, am I ever going to use them? That do I need Terminators, or am I going to get Wolfguard Terminators because I'm never buying a normal Terminator? That kind of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so yeah, and it is what it is at the end of the day with with that kind of thing. But when you break it down and look at it cold, it felt lacking as a preview for Games Workshop's biggest event.
I think that's a fair,
That's all I'm saying.
I think that's a fair summation. I think we
And
should
it didn't
probably.
help that people started to leave as soon as like Space Wars were announced. I think like it was like that's it. Oh yeah, we started doing the questions. People started to leave, and of course, bless some young kid asked about like when whichever Primarch is coming. Um, but they handled it well. Live audience handled it well. Adam Troke was
They've got
quite on
Adam.
it.
We've said before, Adam
Yeah.
Troke's well skilled in that particular field.
But as people were walking out, he was saying, "You don't want to leave yet. You don't want to leave yet. There's something. There's something. There's something." And that something was being given one Space Wolf model, which don't get me wrong, is cool. But it was like, hold on, what are they not doing? Because previously they'd done it right at the end. By the way, here's a little something. Here's a trailer.
Yeah.
And whether they did that like knowingly, I don't know. But it held me hanging on for a. Come on, this.
There's got to be something, surely. There's got to be, and then it wasn't.
Even with that, even knowing that they said there was going to be no heresy, it was like.
I would have bet money there was going to be a teaser.
Right, but there we go. Anyway, so that's that done. We'll take a break there. I'd like to welcome Dan Abnett to the show once again. It's been a while. How are you, Dan?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me back.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. So we are now, well, how many years is it since that first Horus Rising book came out? A fair few, should we say?
Yes, it's basically 20.
20, yeah.
Yeah.
And we are pretty much we're at the end of the main run of books with End of the Death Part 3. And we just thought we'd get authors on, have a little look back over what's been quite a monumental task, and have a catch up as well, because it's been a while since we've had any authors on the show. So I just want to start with, can you remember back all those years ago, what were your first impressions when the subject was first approached?
I certainly can remember back, and I mean, in fact, professionally, I've had to, because we keep coming back to it. It's I remember being excited. We'd done, Black Library had begun to do some really good things, and we were really surprised when we were sort of called in and said, well, we're going to do the Horus Heresy, and we went, wow, we actually get to play with some serious lore, and it's something we all found fascinating, and we knew it would be a monumental task. I think it's difficult to remember whether we genuinely believed we would actually get to do it all the way through, or whether it would be one of those things that fizzled out or didn't end up being what we wanted it to be. But our determination was set to do it, and we also had to overcome obstacles like, could a team of novelists work together? Because that was writing a novel is a very different thing to, say, writing a script or something. So it's quite a difficult thing to mesh together. But we were incredibly enthusiastic. BL was enthusiastic. GW was enthusiastic. Gave us enormous support, and we sort of went at it from there with a huge energy. That, in all honesty, looking back, I think maybe we were like too eager, because we were going to burn out far too quickly. And the fact that we didn't, we were like, I could imagine. It wasn't the first meeting. It was one of the early meetings that I could imagine writing books towards the end, or even past the end, like the Scouring or something like that, and going, oh, I'd love to do that, and thinking, I wonder if we'll ever get there. And naively, we thought at the beginning that it would be like maybe 10, 12 books, seriously. And the fact that it was longer than that was our fault as much as anything else, and underestimating how much story there was to tell. Because obviously we were trying to do a number of different things. One is to flesh out an era that was distinctly different to 40k, in order to make the point that there was a difference. It couldn't just be the same thing. It had to have a different feel to it. We had to do justice to the lore that existed, which was quite extensive. They 10 plus years of writing background notes about the Horus Heresy to suit whatever the game needed. So there was no coherency to it, and it was often contradictory, but there was a huge amount of stuff. And then obviously also to fill in all the enormous gaps, which there were enormous gaps. There were either literal gaps of several years during the period of the Horus Heresy where no one knew what happened, or there were peculiarities like why did this happen, and where were these people when this, and all those sorts of things. So we knew we had to artfully create some continuity to bind the rest of the continuity together to make it as coherent as we could. But we just, like I said, we just went for it. Went for a huge enthusiasm. I remember writing Horus Rising and being so excited at the prospect of this simultaneous sense of using lore that I never thought I get to talk about, but also world building like a demon, trying to vest it in some kind of situation that made sense. So it was, and we went from there. And And I think, probably about halfway through, we went, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're still doing this." And as it expanded and the more books got added, and we realised that if we were going to do justice to everything, we needed to go sideways as well as forward. So we did that for a while, and we got just painting portraits of all the different legions. Then realising that actually it was a lot, and we needed what the readers really liked was a sense of forward momentum. So got back into that, and there were in 20 years there are moments where there was like, oh, we need to pull on the reins, and we need to do this, and we need to, we were learning how to do it as we went.
Sure.
And I think it's a staggeringly huge project. Particularly, I mean, it would have been staggeringly huge for one or two people to write the whole thing, so that was not feasible. But also, it was staggeringly huge to keep a team of writers motivated and together. So yeah, an achievement. And when we finally got to the Siege of Terror, it was like, can't believe we're here. I really can't believe we're here. And even then, when we were sort of old hands, and it's like, this should be easy. Of course, it's not easy. It's right, the Siege of Terror, easy. All sorts of things there. Again, you're learning as you go along. Going, for example, the fact that that The End of the Death is so big and was published in 3 volumes was not, although many people insist it was an ingenious marketing scheme by Black Library to get 3 times the money for the final book. It simply was. I started writing it, and I kept saying to them, "There's so much to get in. I'm either going to have to give you a very truncated view, which will leave loads of things out, or try and get in almost as everything I possibly can and cover all the bases and close off storylines and connect up with this." And I said, and to me, that's the way it should be done. This is the most epic moment in the entire franchise history.
Yeah.
One of the ways to, not only do we need to do it justice, it needs to feel huge, but also it needs to feel huge in terms of its scale. That the big things, like this is finally the Emperor, Emperor and Horus, Sanguinius, all these huge things, I think need to be set against smaller storylines of regular people, so that you get that contrast. And they said, just write it and we'll work out how to publish it. So that's what we did.
Fair enough. Yeah. So obviously you've mentioned that things changed, things adapted. Can you remember, like, because early on, as you said, you thought the book series was going to be X long, and quickly realized it was going to change. Was that how do I put this? How did those changes? Were those changes soft? Was there ever a hard point where it was like, we need to shift what we're doing here, or was it more how are we going? How do we push through?
Most of it was organic. Of it was organic, and some bits were accidental. I mean, in some respects, you could see a book like once the initial trilogy came out, and you could see in those books where there was a continuity of storyline.
Yeah.
And there were also multiple legions involved in those. So there was a sense that this is how we do the series. And then obviously we stepped away. We thought it would be a good idea to step away and do stories that are about specific incidents. So you get The Flight of the Eisenstein. You get a book like Legion, for instance, where I specifically stepped away and said, I'm going to deliberately look at a legion that's the Alpha Legion that is just let's have a portrait of them and see what they're doing. So, and then other people went, oh, in that case, I can do this legion or whatever like that. And that's when it started to go expand sideways. Which I think was really worthwhile, because otherwise there would have been we'd have lost out on an awful lot of good stuff. But obviously to go sideways and spend a book focused on one legion means you're not necessarily advancing the whole plot. So there were times when we had a slightly sort of harder reset where we went, no, we need to get this on track. Not because we're doing it wrong, but because we want to keep the readers happy. We want to keep it flowing along. So an example of that, I think, may be something like Unremembered Empire, from my point of view, which was very much a case of, can you do a book that sort of grabs hold of all sorts of different strands and brings them together and ties them up in one place so that we can advance the story in a more linear fashion. And also, I don't think until latterly we considered doing the Siege of Terror as a separate sort of appendix to the main series. Well, when we realized, we said, no, let's do that. Let's control it. Let's make it this set shape, and that'll be branded its own thing. So there were decisions that were made. And, when you're doing it for the best part of 20 years, those are the sort of decisions that might take 2 years to come into being.
So the Siege of Terror, was that decision, was that with the authors involved? It wasn't a decision from Games Workshop. It was at all
I think
parties?
most of the decisions that were made were an organic decision by the creative collective trying to produce this series and finish it. I think that doing the Siege of Terror as its sort of its own brand, as this the end sequence of the Horus Heresy series as a whole, that probably came from BL simply because it made it easier for them to put it on the shelves and say,
Sure.
here is the Siege of Terror as a component thing. Still Horus Heresy, but this is the end book, so we can number them in
Right.
that way and everything. And I've got no problem with that because otherwise it can get confusing. Some of the, a 40k novel title is often similar to another 40k novel title. So if all you've got is, one name or another, you're going, I don't know what, but to have that sense of they're going to have this, they're going to look like this, they're going to be like this. I think made it work quite well. And they know their job. They know how these things work.
And that aspect of producing any kind of artwork where marketing has to be part of that and allows them to do the special editions and all that jazz. How were those meetings? Like, obviously Siege of Terror, a mini series, 6 authors. Was it smoothly decided who was writing what stories and how they felt?
Yes, it was. I think by that stage, even though not everybody in that final lineup had been there from the start, we'd all spent times in the Horus Heresy minds writing the novels, and there was a sense of a real team eager to do it and honoured to be part of that final lineup, and also astonished that we were finally there. I mean, really, I cannot exaggerate the sense that we were going, oh my God, we're finally writing. We finally got there. We've done everything. We've got there. We're doing this series, and the lineup for the first few books, I think the first 3 or 4 books was set when we started, and then there were question marks left. We didn't assign all 8 books, or the editors did not assign all 8 books at the beginning of that process. It's like, let's see how we get on and let's see where we go. So I knew I was at least doing book 4, and I was very happy with that. In fact, Saturnine is probably one of my favorites. Very, very pleased with Saturnine, and so we sort of put it together, and then once we got past that point, it was a case of, right, who's going to do this, who's going to get to do more than one, etc., etc. And the final decisions were made there. But it really was a matter of how, because you could go into that, because that in itself took several years to do. So you could go into that and somebody going up front, yeah, I'm happy about doing this. And then when they get there, they go, actually, I'm not happy about doing that anymore because I found it really difficult to do this or whatever. So we didn't plan it to such a degree that it was set in stone and couldn't be moved.
Sure, I get that. We'll get on to Saturnine in a minute. You say you knew book 4 was your thing. It appeared to me, talking to a couple of authors outside, they knew you were going to do book 8 as well. Was that always something you wanted to do to bookend it?
I kind of did. Having got that far, having written the first one and having got that far, I kind of thought, well, it would be nice to write the last one as well.
Yeah.
By the same token, that wasn't a foregone conclusion because there also is strong arguments for saying, well, maybe by the 20 years on, it's up to somebody else to finish it. Maybe we need that contrast and there's all sorts of other things going on. And also I had and I don't think this is an inappropriate thing to say, but I had a feeling about the final book, even before I knew it was going to be even more of a monster than it turned out to be. Don't get me wrong, I'm very, very proud of that book. I'm very, very pleased with the way it worked, but it is a humongous thing. It took a long time to write. It's very, very complicated. I think it's quite demanding on the reader. It's deliberately quite demanding on the reader in places, in all sorts of different ways. But I remember we had us having several conversations about it, and I said the last book, the final book of the Horus Heresy, the final book of the Siege of Terror, is kind of a poison chalice, because everyone's been waiting for it. So no matter how good you could write the best book in the history of the world, and it would still disappoint someone because it's not quite what they were expecting. With Saturnine is the great comparison to me. I love Saturnine. Saturnine seems to have been almost universally loved, but it didn't have the same benchmark to hit. All I had to do was write a really good book, and I wrote the end of that. And I said to the editors at the end, I said, I don't know if I can write a better Horus Heresy novel than that. That does it all, because the expectation wasn't that high. There were surprises in it. I was able to do things, and I said, It doesn't matter. I think I did the best possible version of The End of the Death that I could. But with every other single book in the entire series, readers have always got that if nothing else, they've got the sort of caveat that if they read a book in the Horus Heresy series and it doesn't give them the thing they expected or thought they were entitled to see, there's always, well, maybe it will be in the next book, or maybe, do you see what I mean? But we know with the final book, this is it. It's either here or it's not happening.
Yeah.
Which is why I tried to put in as many different things in as I possibly could, including parts of the story which were geared towards the idea of why there are contradictions in the history and the records and all those kind of things. But I remember talking to Aaron about it and saying, whoever writes it, that the quality of the book is not important. The very fact that it is the last one is going to be an albatross.
Yeah.
And when they asked me to do it, I said, well, of course I will, because there are so many good reasons to do that. Nevertheless, I'm aware of that. I actually think it is a superior book to Saturn IX. I think it is. It could be, because it absolutely is one novel in 3 volumes. It's not 3 books that have been tacked together. There is internal structure and arc, and there's all sorts of things going on in it. But like I said, I'm aware of the fact that it is a juggernaut, and is a juggernaut of a read. Weirdly, when it first came out, a lot of people said they loved it. A lot of people went, "Oh my god, I just like so much going on, and it's so big, and why have you done this?" Now, a couple of years have gone by, I'm getting much more regular positive feedback from people who've had time to read it, or read it again, or listen to it again. They didn't rush through it because it had just come out. They've gone back to it and they've read it more carefully. And I think they're beginning to see how much sort of subtle working there is in it going on there.
Sure.
That always happens with books, and it particularly happens with Horus Heresy books. It's like the day it comes out, people have read it in the first couple of hours. And I'm thinking, I'm glad you're that enthusiastic, but you must have rushed through that and have not fully appreciated its stuff. So a lot of the feedback that I particularly treasure is the stuff that has come on books 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the line, when people have had time to reflect on it and gone, actually, do you know what?
Yeah, I think there's an argument as well that the people who, not all of the people, but a certain amount of people who read the book that quickly are sometimes in it for different reasons.
Yes,
than readers who take time. So they're definitely
there's a power thing there. I'm the first one to read it, and therefore I'm the first one to announce a verdict on it. And quite often, if that verdict can be controversial.
Exactly. Yeah, there's all of that involved as well, which must be a frustration as a creative.
Nothing you can do about it. Once you finish writing a book, it belongs to the people who read it, no matter how fast they read it. You know. So.
Yeah. So with End of the Death, there's quite a number of different points you have to hit, and ways to get those points as well, which isn't necessarily straightforward. How much did you struggle with those? There are some choices you make in there that surprised me, that I was wondering where you were going for a little bit, and there were some that really kind of grabbed me straight. Like, it was a real kind of mix of different, trying to ascertain different stuff. And when we reviewed it, we had mixed kind of opinions, and obviously we reviewed it fairly quickly as well. Not to say that we didn't like the book. We did like the book. We were really, when you're on a podcast, you can get to nitpick.
Sure.
But so what were the struggles like deciding how to handle those?
It's sort of immense. I mean, part of the struggle was I produced. I've got the box somewhere. So many pages of notes even before I started writing it. More pages than was in the final book. It's just the stuff that I wanted how to thread those together. Also, it's not just a matter of what story points to include, which in this case was as many as I possibly could, because there are so many things we need to touch on, but how to get them across, how to communicate. So certain things that I thought were going to be, the established law. So it's like, tick the box. I've got to put this in. Death of Sanguinius, tick the box. Sort of the curse falling upon the Blood Angels is a really good example. It's in there. But then as you get close to that, you're going, first of all, exactly where am I placing this in the flow of the story? Because it's an important thing that happens, but it's also sort of a peripheral thing to the main clash between Horus and the Emperor. How do I make it significant? And also, how do I convey it? Because how do I dramatize that? It's a simple fact. So people who know the law will know what's happening, but people who don't need to have it explained, although there are very few people in the story who can explain it because this is a complete, sort of a new thing. So there were lots of things like that where it wasn't a matter of what to include. It is a matter of where to include it, how to pace it up, how to place it between one thing and another, how to get the novel to work as a novel with ups and downs, and so it wasn't just like one thing after another. So there were, those sorts of things were very, very difficult. How to move from very, very big and loud to very, very quiet, to go from a sort of human scale to a god scale, and all these sorts of things. How to do justice to all the characters, how to, as we said just now, the how to account for the various contradictions, like the exactly who was it that stood in the path of Horus to defend the emperor, and and there's all those sorts of things. Was Horus one of the other ones? Did Horus, as it says in some of the early versions, actually stride across the battlefields of Terra, or did he stay on the vengeful spirit? I mean, that's one of the great big canonical differences. It depends which old codex you read, that it's different versions of that. And I'm going, well, is there a way of doing both? That's those sorts of things where I was thinking about playing around with the fact that by that point the warp is in everything, and so it determined even things like the fact that the book is for the most part in the sort of present tense, because I wanted it all to be happening now, because it is only a now at this point. So things like that. And then to have sort of chorus voices, like the sections that are Malcador, able to give you a kind of superior overview, no matter how artsy and poetic it is, of the bigger picture, which contrasts to, say, I don't know, one of the characters on the ground who doesn't really know what else is going on because they're too tied up in the immediacy of the war. So to play around with those factors, and to do a little foreshadowing of things as well. And also we had a bunch of storylines that we had generated that there was an obligation to see them through and see them to a conclusion. I don't mean they were bad storylines, but it was some of those ones where you've got a baton passing between authors down through the Horus Heresy into the Siege of Terror, and some people have just gone, oh, I'll just keep that plate spinning and somebody else can deal with it. And you get to a point where you go, the plate's still spinning, guys. There's no one dealt with that. And it's okay, I will do that.
I was about to say, did you curse anyone? And did you ever curse yourself for leaving a spinning plate in your way that you had to maintain?
No, no, I don't think so. There was one that I wished that I had pushed us as a group to cover more ground with earlier on, but I won't say what it is. But there was one where I thought, we've kind of left that hanging to the last minute, and that's a shame. But there are other logistical things, and this again, absolutely by no means a criticism, because obviously the seventh book, Aaron's book, is amazing, but Aaron chose, and he did this deliberately to narrow the focus, to come in very close on some very specific events, rather than taking the broad scope that most of the other Siege of Terror books have done. And I think that's a nice, refreshing change, because it alters things, and otherwise it's going to just get a bit much.
Yeah.
But obviously at that point, I then had to pull the scope right back out again and sort of catch everybody up. So there's all of that going on. So it's like making a movie, whether you're on a handheld camera or you're sort of miles away on a sort of a crane camera, all this sort of stuff. So a lot of strange things that have to alter. And also, these are books that are under greater scrutiny than your average novel. It is not a terrible admission to say that I did quite a lot of rewriting. There was a thing that I was doing in the final book that was sort of agreed originally, and so I carried on and did it really for what ended up being the first volume. And then it was subjected to the scrutiny of the IP people, who obviously have a very important job to do. And they didn't say, can you change it because it's bad? They said, we think it's fantastic, but can you change it anyway?
Right.
Because it opens a door to IP things that we don't want opened.
Sure.
So again, I had to go back and sort of rejig things and find other ways to cover the ground that I had covered in that particular way. And I don't disagree with them either. I don't disagree with them. I thought it was a good idea, and it turned out that that I could see the reasons that it was problematic. So
that's huge. That's one for chat rooms to talk about.
That is, yeah.
to guess on. Yeah. Well, first we can say thanks, Aaron, for making your life harder, right? I
Not at all.
don't
In
know how
fact,
often you could say that
he's
about Aaron, but Aaron.
he did an amazing job with
He
what he
did.
was doing. And in fact, I had started writing the last one before he had finished his, so we were overlapping. So we would have what we called jokingly the Dawn Patrol, which is DORN, which was we would call each other up. We're both early risers, so 5 o'clock in the morning we get on Zoom. How are you doing today? What have you done? And he would catch me up with the things that he was putting in that I might want to pick up on, and I was saying, right, I've done this, so you don't have to do that, and
Sure.
so it was very, very much like the way Graham and I had kicked off in the very, very beginning. Yes, it's just in fact, at one point he was saying, "Oh, I think I've got room to do this," and I went, "Don't! I've done it now." So,
bless him.
yeah,
It would take him a lot longer as well. But that's quite interesting actually, because I found Aaron's book hard to read, and I really liked it. But my word, was it a hard read, and that carried on a little bit, as you say, into yours. It was like, war is grim, and that was really shown across of both books before before the End and the Death got completely doolally with time and space and everything else, which kind of helped break that up. I will say Sanguinius's death was, you chose to do it quite, not just brutal, but like there was no glory really in that.
There wasn't.
That was a
there
definite
was absolutely, that very, very deliberate. The fight itself is quite glorious to begin with. It's like two great heroes going at it, which is sort of what you are led to believe, A, because of who Sanguinius is, and B, what the myths tell you. But I thought when it comes down to it, it's going to be really unpleasant. And I wanted a lot of the times, because what I think the Horus Heresy as a whole novel series shows as a whole is the sort of unvarnished truth behind the myth. And the fact that when it comes down to it, there's nothing glorious about that sort of thing, apart from the heroic sacrifice that he is making to try and stop Horus, or at least delay him. So yes, that was there was the temptation to give him that sort of epic Arthurian death scene, and I went, no, it's not going to be like that at all, because at this point Horus is just monstrous, and he's just going to do horrible things. So yeah, there are moments like that. There are some incredibly brutal moments in it.
Wonderful stuff. Let's flick back to Saturnine briefly.
Yeah.
Because I know you've said there that you think that it's been surpassed by the End and Death, and everyone's going to have their opinion on that. I know Michael from Track of Words and myself had a discussion on the show about whether it's the best 40k book or not, and I think it came down, the discussion between us was Saturnine takes part in a series that you have to understand what's going on in the series, and Necropolis can be read individually.
There you go.
Which I think is testament to your writing on both those books, to be fair.
Thank you.
How, as you said, Saturnine was a bit out of the blue, bit of freedom there. Did you have an idea in mind from the start with that?
I had certain ideas. During the siege, it seemed to us there was an importance to focus on certain characters and what they were doing, and to show because otherwise it's just laboriously a fight followed by a fight followed by a fight. So you need to see the sort of politics and the machinations, and it felt like the fourth book in what was essentially an 8-book sequence. The fourth book had to have some kind of upswing for the good guys, even though they were still literally backs to the wall and they couldn't get much more horrible. And I wanted to show to have this sort of almost unknown victory that takes place, and sort of this sort of stuff, and to focus on Dawn, a character I came to absolutely love writing it. The reason I like Saturnine so much, I think, is because it is everything works. It's a conventional length, though. It's got a conventional novel structure. It's got some great surprises in it. It's got, I think, some satisfying moments in it. It's got, if nothing else, it's got some great set pieces. I think all the action sequences, each one of the big action sequences, I deliberately wrote in a different way so it wouldn't feel like the other one. So whether it's the White Scars charge, the cavalry charge, or the sort of the defense of the bridge Each one is written in a different kind of language to get across a different kind of thing. Uh, so I think it works really, really well. But like I said, I think it works really, really well because it's got the freedom. It's upbeat. It's got the freedom to be its own thing and surprise people because it hasn't got that weight of expectations on it. It's not the last book, and it's not the book with the really big lore in it that people are saying, well, if it's not this, it's wrong.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that was it. And I remember, I finished it, and that was when the conversation happened where I said, I'm very proud of that. I'm very happy with the way that's worked out. Even if the last book is better, it won't be better if you sort of it can't because it will be hamstrung by its own existence. Yeah.
And how gratifying is it to give someone like Dawn that moment?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's been a recurring thing for me in the course of writing for the 40k universe over the last however many years it is that whenever I write a major canon character or a chapter I haven't written before or a legion I haven't written before or something like that, I end up going, oh, that's why they're cool.
Sure.
No fear. I didn't hate the Ultramarines at all, but it fell to me to write No Fear, and now I'm a fan of Ultramarines. Space Wolves as a result of Prospero Burns, Alpha Legion as a result of Legion. Sort of these sorts of things. You get the opportunity to literally spend time with these characters and find out what makes them cool, so you can write a cool book about them. And you go, oh, they're really, really good. So Saturnine and also The End of the Death. So this huge. I developed this sort of huge appreciation for characters like Dawn particularly, but also Valdor and Vulcan and sort of other major players. Just really enjoyed writing them and really enjoyed finding out there was more to them than the sort of persona that is often the simplified persona that is often presented for them. That's a great thing to do. That's a really good thing to do. And the same goes for actually some of the traitors. You think, oh, this is a really interesting, tragic things to do there. I think particularly by the time it gets to The End of the Death, although it is happening in Saturnine as well. To me, Abaddon, who I already loved because I've been writing him since Horus Rising, but has taken on such a depth of complexity. The idea that he's sort of his struggles. Even though we know he's sort of, in many respects, the biggest villain of them all and will be, the fact that he is, despite everything, still working to a noble code and sort of hating what's happening but loyal to his father and all these sort of that's a really complicated character to write and have fun with. And so some of his victories, even though they are victories for chaos or the traitors, you go, yeah, good on you.
Yeah, he's really starting to become the Abaddon we know in 40k, which is again the kind of thing you want to see in these series.
Yeah, he's got a way to go, but yes, you can see that. You can see that idea that is, if nothing else, you can see him sort of, if not learning from his mistakes and the mistakes of others, at least recognizing the mistakes of others.
Yeah.
And then that, sort of X thousand years down the line, he's going to go, right, okay, that was a mistake. What do we do so that that's not a mistake anymore? Sort of that sort of thing.
Okay, so moving away from all that a little bit, back to kind of process. Obviously, you've done comic book work for many years now, and that's, I'm assuming, I don't know that much, quite collaborative work with the artist.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, sometimes you just write a script, it goes off, and the next thing you see it's been drawn.
Right.
But sometimes, as particularly some of the things I've worked on for a long time with say 2000 AD, I work with the same artist, and we have an ongoing relationship. We talk a lot. That's how we develop the ongoing series, things like Brink and The Out and Lawless in 2000 AD. So it really does depend. But yes, you're right. Comics, no matter how they're done, comics are a team sport.
Sure.
Because you're working with an artist, you're not telling the story yourself. It's a very different thing from writing prose.
So obviously you've done Siege of Terror, Horus Heresy, and also The Beast Arises. How has that process of being in the room, of talking, of I'm sure loads of emails and chats and whenever, how has that changed your approach to book writing when you're by yourself, or has it?
Has it? I don't know if it has, to be honest. I mean, the reason I still write, I started out writing comics, then I started writing novels, which seemed like a progression, and then obviously later on computer games as well. But for a lot of people, I think they maybe wherever they start out, they move to something else, and that becomes the thing that they do.
Sure.
And I love writing novels. I absolutely love writing novels, but I still write comics because I also love writing comics because it's a very different thing to do. It's a very different process. So writing a novel to me is still. I've lost count. It's something like 70 novels I've written now, and the process itself evolves. And you learn each time you start a book, you go, right, I know how to do this, and you start writing, go, no, I don't. I need to learn how to do a new thing.
Sure.
Even in my most, I mean, I've always, for example, all the novels I've ever written, I've written in chronological reading order. I don't skip about. I write them in the order in which they're going to be read because I feel that gives me the greatest control. Over the one I've just finished and delivered, I realized that for reasons of just efficiency, I had to do it in chunks that I then bound together in a different way. So
Okay.
you learn techniques that are forced upon you by the nature of what sort of thing you're writing. So I don't think, other than my own evolution as a writer of prose, I don't think that working collaboratively has changed that. What it changed was the way I collaborate on prose, if you see what I mean. We learned how to do it. That was because that's almost a different thing. When you're working on, a comic, sometimes with a big crossover event where there are lots of writers and artists involved, you have regular discussions and you can make adjustments as you go along. You know, you can literally rewrite a page of script, or you can change the art, you can read dialogue because there is a process. With something like the Horus Heresy, and applied to with the Beast of Rises, I suppose, is that you get together, you discuss everything, and then you all go their separate ways to write each bit of it. And then you sort of come back and compare notes, and you let each other read stuff, and then so it's the collaboration is often longer. By the time we got to the Siege of Terror, we were talking. Not only were we having the regular meetings, but we would, because of the advent of things like Zoom and things like that, we were talking on a very, very regular basis with each other. And you know, sort of part of the vast amounts of notes I created on the end of the death were the email thread conversations where I'd got up in the morning and frantically asked a question, and everyone else in the group has gone, oh, this is my answer, or I think, what about this, or and I've extracted them, and so there is a collaborative thing. It's I think to me, the collaboration on writing novels is about the collaboration on ideas, and the execution of the novel is separate.
Sure.
Whereas the collaboration on something like comics, and I imagine it's true of things like a writer's room on a TV show, it's much more, it's a collaboration on ideas and process at the same time. So there is a slight separation. So, but I suppose it has taught me stuff about writing novels. There might be things that I'm doing now in novels that are just my novels that I wouldn't have attempted before if I hadn't gone through the process of banging ideas off other people and seeing where they came to rest, and how to do them. So
awesome. Yeah, just kind of jumping back and forwards here. You said your first novel was a while ago.
It was. Yes, it was.
Shall we say? It was a while ago.
Yes.
It's a veteran novel now.
Yeah.
And certainly reading Eisenhorn, Early Gaunt's Ghosts, and then we come to, you mentioned earlier in Saturnine, particularly Malcador's pieces, where I had to stop myself during his first page of the way he was talking and kind of reassess how I was reading it. And I must admit there were words there I didn't bother looking up, but they felt like I could work out roughly what they were within the context of how he was talking. And it certainly appears to me that it's the same writer, but it's a very different writer now. How those Malcador pieces particularly, how much did you have to really sit and stretch your brain on those? Or was that actually not too bad with your experience you've now built up?
I did have to stretch my brains. There are all sorts of different things there. Yes, you evolve. You should evolve after, in the best part of like 25, 30 years of writing novels. I look back on my first novels, things like First and Only. I'm very fond of them, but I consider them they are very much simpler. I look back and think, oh, I'd do that better now, or I'd find a better way of doing that, or and that's both in terms of the prose itself and also in terms of the mechanism of the way things
Storytelling.
happen. And then, sort of once you've written a great big gun battle in an early Gaunt book, you're immediately going, well, I can't do that again. How can I do that different? How can I improve that? And then you find techniques so you're not repeating yourself all the time. With the End of the Death, the vocabulary in the End of the Death particularly is on occasion really over the top. And that wasn't just me going, look at me, everybody, I'm a famous writer. It was me going, it bloody well ought to be. Everything about this is big and ridiculous. It's melodramatic. It's vast. When you're sharing thoughts with a character like Malcador or indeed Horus or some of the other characters, they need to be dealing with concepts that seem like the sort of things that you yourself couldn't grapple with, because these are people who are controlling an imperium, and it's not something I would necessarily. Every now and then I introduce all sorts of weird vocabulary to my novels, and they're often specific to a novel, and they're often things that I've invented myself. With The End of the Death, I just went, I don't care at this point. I think it should have essentially ridiculous purple prose in places. Again, to contrast between the likes of Malcador talking in this ultra lyrical, poetic, deeply philosophical way with, sort of, like I said, someone on the ground who's thinking about it in very, very sort of simplistic terms. So it was a very deliberate choice to do that, and a deliberate choice to play around with the mode of that. So in The End of the Death, Malcador's not only using the hardest vocabulary pretty much of anything. Some of his descriptions of things are wildly over the top, deliberately. He's also first person. So all the other parts of the novel are third person. He's first person, except Horus's bits, which are weirdly second person. It's somebody, as it were, talking to Horus. And I thought, right, okay, those are sort of two of the. There are so many narratives in here, but those two need to be separated out. So you've got the one first person oversight, and you've got which is like the greatest distance and the greatest scope, and therefore the greatest language. And you've got the other one that couldn't be closer to the object of everyone's attention, but is meant to sort of disorientate you because it is sort of, it's almost like dreamlike, that the idea of you are doing this, you are doing that. It's a weird way of telling a story, and you couldn't sustain a whole novel with that. Again, one of the reasons the novel is big but is broken up into these very small. The chapters themselves are very small. There are lots of small chapters. Is that some of those bits are so rich you wouldn't want to read it for very long. So I'll give you a little bit, and then we'll go and do something else, and then I'll give you a little bit more, and then I'll go and do something else. And they're meant to be these contrasts. So you go from all-out action to philosophical contemplation to weirdness to whatever, so that you never have to stay too long in something that you might be going, oh my god, stop, I'm full. They would,
in the best possible way. I had to gird myself for the Malcador bits. Like Malcador's talking now. Let's let's be on it, which is great. And I suppose that's the advantage and the beauty of the book as a medium. To do that on film would be really hard to maintain a style through, whereas in a book you can step away so much easier. Well, not easy, but you know what I mean. You have the ability to step away and do something completely different and then bring it back without interrupting the flow too much, because you know how it's structured and stuff like that.
I think that was very much deliberate, because it's in many respects it's sort of like 2 or 3 dozen different novels that are running at the same time, and you're skipping between one to the other. So you're not only, in terms of the language, the specific vocabulary used in different threads, the point of view, the tense and things like that, which I'm mucking around with, but also things like, metaphorically speaking, how close the camera is. So you get those sort of very broad, not only Malcador's distance, but you get the sort of very, very widescreen big battle stuff, and then you get the very intensely intimate things like Cinderman in the library, where it's very close to and claustrophobic and that sort of stuff. So, like I said, so you don't stay in one thing, and one of the jobs I had to do was to juggle to make sure that, as it were, I didn't accidentally import the style or language of one bit into another bit and contaminate it somewhere else. So Malcador's stuff stayed in Malcador's thing, and that sort of thing. So very deliberately done like that.
Awesome. So a major aspect of particularly End of the Death, is it's the ending of one story, but the opening of 40k as we're going to know it. Everything changes on that point, really. Obviously takes some time, but we get there. You're dealing with major decisions, I suppose, about how the Emperor's going to, how does he get to the point where he faces Horus, and who is he at the point he faces Horus, which is a major aspect of it as well. Was when you were writing that, obviously I'm assuming you had good contact with Black Library.
Yes.
Were you just a little bit, like, not fearful but trepidatious to push too far to open up a different kind of modern 40k, or was that you were safe in the knowledge of your
Yes, there was a certain, it's very difficult to define it, but in the course of all the discussions between me and BL and also the other authors, we knew that we could take it to a certain point, and we could also prefigure things that people knew were coming, but we didn't, and indeed shouldn't, worry about literally setting certain things up, because as you point out, it's a long way down the road. There's a lot of things will happen before we get to the 40k we recognize. All we need to do is to show those trends, or to hint at the beginnings of things that we're going, oh, wait a minute, I think that's going to be that. And there's no confirmation, but you know where something is going, and these sort of threads. So it was. There are lots of things where there is a kind of like wink to the reader, going, yeah, you know what we're doing here, but we're not literally doing it here, because this doesn't happen for another 500 years. Sort of just those sorts of bits and pieces. And yes, dealing with those big themes about it was, for instance, incredibly difficult not to. And I don't think I did it. Some people might think I did it, but not to sort of definitively come down on one side or the other in terms of the Emperor. Is the Emperor a good thing or a bad thing? Is the Emperor? He's just the Emperor. Yeah. And depending on which strand you're in, you hear the arguments for and against. Those who are incredibly loyal to him, those who are fighting him, those of them are standing with him, but going, I think he's, sort of the worst thing that could ever happen to us. So you get that sort of chorus of voices. Malcador's one's foe is another one, Cinderman's another one, even Loken to a certain extent, who are giving you potential takes on what an opinion of the Emperor could be, whilst we see him do extraordinary things, but also remain unknowable and sort of still at such a distance as that. So they're really a very tricky line to walk, and also a tricky line to walk because in the middle of all of that, no spoilers, but in the middle of all that, I was still, with BL's approval, trying to put in things that we didn't know happened. That in the big confusion of everything, there were other huge things going on that we weren't really aware of, and 40k history has not recorded. Because I wanted there to be some surprises, because when you get, sort of the lore attached to the Horus heresy, for instance, is incredibly weighted to the beginning and the end of it. That's where the densest stuff is, that we know what happens here. And I knew that again, one of the problems with the last book would be, it's a bit like Titanic, is we know the ship's going to sink. And it doesn't matter how dramatic you make that, it's like, oh yeah, okay, well, we knew this was coming. What can I put into this? So you go, oh, I didn't know that's why the ship was sinking, or I didn't know that was at stake at the same time, or that this was happening, or blah blah blah. So they were trying to find those things which were all obviously all written with their approval.
There's a lovely Freudian slip you just made there, where you called Titanic Titanicus, which is most suitable, I think. Absolutely brilliant. We're going to wrap this up in a bit. There's just a couple more questions I want to try and get through to you. So there are, without any spoilers for other projects, there are characters that we meet in the Heresy that you have utilised later on. At what point were you thinking of those characters? Was it the secondary story needed someone, and or you had, and this character would be able to do all the things you wanted, or were there characters while you were writing Heresy who were like, I'm saving this bit for later, I need to drag X through into another story?
I probably a little bit of both, really, to be honest. There were certain things that I didn't want it to be, for everything to be a springboard for something else. Sure. I mean, it had to be its own story. And I just think that when you get to a thing where you've got such a vast cast, particularly in that last book, that if there's a moment of making a character either a walk-on character who says something and walks off again, or a walk-on character where the reader goes, oh, that's an extra bit of fun. That's a kind of a little Easter egg, and why not? And then in some respects, to the people who know who that character is and what that character is related to, you go, oh, that makes an awful lot of sense now. I can see a through line there, and it's not like I've been waiting 20 years to do it. It's just like, well, do you know what?
Yeah.
Why not? There is that, and before there is any accusations of like all of these things, so many coincidences. You go, well, I'm sorry, time stopped, reality's warped. All of these things are going to come together in really special synchronistic ways. That's why you get those sort of little figurative things. And I have to say, and again, no spoilers, but there are some in there that you don't know yet where that's going. You might have picked up on some, but there are some others there that I'm going, I'm just going to put that in there. And it's quite possible that at some point you're going to go, wait a minute, really? So
there's also always the moment in the story where someone says, oh, we just happen to be following, Luke Skywalker just happens to do this. It's like, yeah, because we're telling Luke Skywalker's story.
Yeah.
So, and it would be a much worse story if you were following the other guy. And Luke Skywalker did the things. So yeah.
There was a point, I think, but it's sort of, I think, sort of during the second of the 3 volumes where I feel that during the second volume, once the sort of attack on the Vengeful Spirit's underway, I could, if I'd wanted to, have kept any one of the storylines, dropped all the others, and that would have been the main thrust of the book. Do you know what I mean? There are different characters, including the Emperor, but there are different characters: Sanguinius, Loken, John Grammaticus, also different characters. You go, and then they become the Luke Skywalker. This could have been how this person saved the day, or this person saved the day. And I think that sense of why is everything happening to this one character is obviated somewhat by the fact that actually everything happens to everybody, and nobody totally saves the day single-handed. But it's a combination of all those things happening at the same time. I mean, in some respects, for instance, the stuff with the Dark Angels is a glorious Arthurian subplot about just reveling in a huge battle with some characters that we haven't seen properly in the later stages of the heresy. But obviously, it plays an incredibly important role in how things play out. So everything pays off somewhere. It's just that sometimes the beneficial consequence of one storyline is seen in another, and vice versa. So that it's like, but for this huge united but not coordinated effort, everything could have gone wrong if one bit had failed.
Sure.
So yeah.
Excellent stuff. I think lastly, have you got a standout moment from the heresy, like either in the books or is there something that I should have sent you this one beforehand. That's my bad on that one.
There are so many moments that I have just loved writing. I mean, just writing Horus Rising, particularly the opening of Horus Rising, and trying to establish what the era felt like. That was still, I can still remember how that felt. There are some of the things. Well, actually, a lot of the stuff that happened in both Saturnine and the End of the Death, I go back to as like individual sequences, and I just go, I'm just so proud of the way that worked. That's just like. Huge epic battles. The battle of the Horus versus the Emperor, going sort of changing a gear and then changing up a gear when you think there's nowhere else to go for. Like I said, the battle at the bridge in Saturnine, the subterranean assault in Saturnine. So many bits and pieces, so many moments where characters get to say or do a really cool thing. In terms of a set piece that I always remember, because it took me by surprise when I wrote it. I was going, I think I'll do this, and then was so pleased with the way it paid off, is actually the sort of the opening sequence of No Fear, with that sort of countdown to disaster, where there is this inexorable momentum to that something bad is going to happen, and it's getting closer and closer and closer, and finally it happens, and then it's even worse you can possibly imagine, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and finally Gilliman goes, like, start the count, to me that's still a fist punch moment where you go, oh my god, they're going to fight back, this is amazing. That has a huge visceral pull. So if you're talking about just a sequence of writing, that bit always stays in my memory. But often it's a character. It's a character doing something unexpected, or it's a character really being themselves and being wonderful, or all those sorts of things. It's been a huge pleasure to do it.
I think the opening of No Fear is a very satisfactory answer to that in terms of bombastic, big blockbuster scenes, and that is what the heresy is, right?
It absolutely is.
It is that. So brilliant. Thank you very much. So where are you with books? Can you talk about what books you've got coming out, or?
I can sort of talk a bit very quickly about bits that are coming. Obviously, I've just published Interceptor City,
Yeah.
which is the sequel to Double Eagle. Another book I'm very pleased with. It was one I wrote it after the end of the death, so it's a wonderful antidote to that because it's literally sort of stuck in a cockpit with one character through the whole book. It's aeronautica, air combat. Double Eagles proved to be popular in a lasting way that I could never have imagined. Interceptor City was the sequel I would have written to it the year after we did a Double Eagle for the fun of it, published it, thought that'll be just fun, that'll be standalone. And then people really, really loved it, and they kept on loving it. So I actually was commissioned to write Interceptor City then, and then the Horus Heresy got in the way.
Yeah.
So coming back to it and going, no, I'm damn well going to write that book, and it was just a wonderful thing to do. Different tone, different scale, different everything, much more sort of technical and everything like that, and also benefited from the fact that I made the, I think, wise decision to set Interceptor City 20 years afterwards, so to reflect the passage of time. So I think it has greater sort of resonance as a novel. So I'm very pleased with that. I hope people are getting good feedback on that. People seem to really liking that. I have since written another one, but I can't tell you what it is. But I've written another one which is now with the editors, which is another big epic one, but not in the same way. Not epic in the, and I think people will go, he's done what? Because it is quite unexpected, and it sort of deals with things that I've sort of not written about before. So I'm looking forward to that being announced so I can talk about it some more, because that was a completely different task. And I'm just starting another one now. The one that people obviously keep asking me about is Pandemonium, the third Beckwin book, which I am incredibly keen to get finished and get published. And for reasons that are slightly too complicated to go into, the Beckwin books are touching upon continuity that is sort of held in stasis at the moment. What's decisions that are far above and beyond my pay grade are being made. And they just said, can you just hold off doing it? Because we'd rather you did it right and then we published it, then you did it and then we had to make you rewrite it because something else has happened. So much as people are clamoring for it, I'm clamoring for it because I want to get that finished. But in the meantime, the benefit of that is that you will get, I think, well, at least three. Intercept City I wrote because I wasn't expecting ever to get to that.
Sure.
The one I've just finished, the one I'm writing now, there are three novels that wouldn't otherwise have existed if we hadn't been going, so what will we do whilst we're waiting to do Pandemonium? And I went, this will be good. And I think they are excitingly different things that people go, oh, I'm glad we got that, because otherwise we wouldn't have done. So yes, keeping very, very busy. The one I've just finished, I think, I hope will be one of those books that just has a broad appeal to all 40k readers, and it doesn't matter what you collect, what army you build, you go, that's interesting, because it's got a sort of not in the same way as Eisenhorn, but it's got the same sort of thing with Eisenhorn, which is it's sort of a primer for what this is, what 40k is like. Here's your way in. Cool. Here's a way to look at 40k and learn about it, even if you know all about it. It's a new way of looking at it again afresh. So I hope it meets with some approval. It's a weighty thing and epic and horrible.
Wonderful stuff.
Again.
We'll look forward to that one. Well, thank you so much for your time and coming back on.
Absolute pleasure. Always happy to return and chat.
Wonderful. And the books as well. Thank you for all the books. It's been many hours for all of us reading and listening to what you put out.
Fantastic. Well, I'm thank you for that. Always happy to come and talk. I mean, ask me to talk to you again when they've announced this book that I'm mysteriously not mentioning, because I'm quite happy to talk about that when the time comes as well.
Wonderful stuff. Brilliant. Cheers. Thanks for that, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, you've made it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth Podcast. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, Howard's got a brand new baby. You may even just have heard some noises as we rushed to record what we had there. Quite tricky with me being away for Adepticon, wanted to record after that. Try and fit it all in around a new baby, etc. Thank you, Howard, for your time on that one. We are pushing forwards. The author interviews is hopefully something we're going to be coming back with for a period of time. I've been talking to a few of them. It was great to see Gav Thorpe, particularly at Adepticon. Lovely to chat with him, as always. But I've got yeses from a number of people. It's just going to be a case of trying to organise time schedules, things like that. Not always easy when people are around the world, that kind of thing. But we will do our best. I'm also going to be putting them up separately onto YouTube. So there's going to be like some like I need to organise how I do it and whatever, but like a sub channel for author interviews where it's just the interview pulled out. They'll go up after the main podcast has gone up, but hopefully we can have a resource just directly of them because I think they're pretty cool. What else is there? If you do like the show, if you have made it this far, hopefully you do like the show. Otherwise, well, more for you. But you can support the show by purchasing from Element Games using our link and our, if you really want to, our codes as well, which are all in the show notes. They're all in the notes for this. We also have a link tree on the socials. You can also use our Warhammer merch link if you're going to buy any of the stuff from Warhammer merch. You can, if you really feel like you want to support the show, then you can support us on Patreon. We don't do any extras for that. That is purely a tip jar. If you feel like you want to support the show financially, then you can come onto Patreon, and massive thank you to anyone who's ever supported us on Patreon and those who continue to do. It's absolutely brilliant. One thing I will say with anyone that you want to become a patron of via Patreon, try not to do it through Apple devices because Apple take a huge portion and no one really wants to make Apple any more money than they have to. In that respect anyway, like the bit where they really rip you off. So you can go to the Patreon website and follow the show there. You can do it for free as well. We don't really post much up on Patreon. There might be the odd thing down the line. We have done things in the past, but very rarely. But you can do that, and it gets posted up there as soon as it goes live anyway. But I'm not sure what else there is to come. We do, if you do have any feedback, if you do have any questions, you do have any topic ideas, then please feel free to get a hold of Greg at theimperialtruth.com with those ideas. You can get us on Instagram as well, imperial_truth. I'm Greg. I'm Child of Fang on Instagram and on Twitter as well. And there's the Facebook page. Again, all these links are in the show notes. We have mentioned there will be probably a short little announcement. I'm not even going to call it an episode, an announcement come out soon because there is something in the works which I'm literally days away from going live with. They're just waiting for a few more things to fall into place. But there's a really cool project coming up that would love you guys to be part of or be able to take advantage of at least. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully it's going to be everywhere anyway, so you won't have much choice but to know about it, which will be super cool. Anyway, I'm really waffling now. So until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.